Chapter 185. Chu Li smiled and took out a small cloth bag from his arms. He handed it to Hu Guanghui. Chief Hu, please present this to High Duke Song or the heir to the High Duke. However, I'm afraid that the heir to the High Duke's words don't count. What's inside? Hu Guanghui cautiously looked at the cloth bag, and did not reach out to take it. Chu Li said, a few jade pendants for the young master to play with. Only then did Hu Guanghui stretch out her hand to take it. She opened the pouch and took a look. Indeed, there were a few jade pendants in different sizes, and they were all of good quality. What exactly is it? Hu Guanghui asked curiously. Chu Li said, present it to High Duke Song. High Duke Song will know what it is. Alright, I'll go in and report first. Guard Chu, please wait a moment. Hu Guanghui cupped his fists and turned around to enter the mansion. The 8 guards stared at him coldly. Judging from their stance, if he took a step forward, they would attack. Chu Li stood aside with his hands behind his back. Lu Yushu was dressed in a green robe and looked handsome. Accompanied by Shi Wu, he swaggered out of the residence. When he saw Chu Li, he immediately smiled and quickened his pace. Lu Yushu stepped out of the residence and came before Chu Li. He frowned and looked at him. Chu Li, why are you here again? Can Master Lu decide whether I come or not? Chu Li smiled. This isn't the Ren public house, is it? Could young Master Lu still be the master of Huai public house? Could it be that the Ren public house wants to control the Huai public house through marriage? Nonsense. Lu Yushu snapped and glared at Chu Li with a dark expression. Surname Chu, don't talk nonsense, you're really thick-skinned, you've been chased out, and you still have the face to come back? Chu Li smiled. Young Master Lu, do you not understand why I was chased out? What do I understand? Lu Yushu's handsome face was gloomy. He glared at Chu Li. He was so infuriated by Chu Li that his murderous intent surged. He wanted nothing more than to stab Chu Li to death with his sword. Chu Li replied, isn't it to save your life? Arrogant. Lu Yushu sneered, do you really think you can kill me? Chu Li smiled. Why don't you ask High Official Shi if it's possible? Chu Li, if you dare to touch my master, don't blame the High Duke's public house for retaliating 1,000 times over. Shi Wu said coldly. It is said that Second Lady Xiao is the first beauty of the great Ji dynasty. It would be best for her to be my master's wife. Chu Li smiled and said, you're quite brave then. The second lady is engaged to King An. I wonder if His Highness King An would agree to it. Shi Wu and Lu Yushu's expressions changed. The relationship between the High Duke's public house and the imperial family was subtle, but they would never betray the imperial family. This was their bottom line. The imperial family was far more powerful than the High Duke's public house. Usually, there were some things that could be done against the royal family, but once something like this happened, it would definitely not end well. The royal family's reputation was very important. Chu Li said, young Master Lu, I'm back. So be careful. Lu Yushu sneered, I don't believe you dare to break into Huai public house. Chu Li smiled without saying a word. Shi Wu pulled Lu Yushu and gave him a look. The two of them turned around and returned to Huai public house. It was really a narrow road for enemies. 2 days ago, it was the master who deliberately humiliated Chu Li. This time it was really a coincidence. However, the master had repeatedly looked for trouble. It was really dangerous. If he angered Chu Li, he was afraid that he would disregard Huai public house and really assassinate him. This time, he followed the master alone. He was afraid that the target would be too big. If he came over quietly and settled things, then everything would be settled and he would no longer be afraid of destroying it. Unfortunately, he met Chu Li. Hu Guanghui passed through 2 courtyards and came to the hall. Song Shiling was undressed and reading a book. His chubby face was solemn. He was completely different from the Song Shiling in front of Chu Li. It was as if they were 2 different people. Heir to the High Duke, Hu Guanghui entered the hall and bowed, that Chu Li is here again. Just chase him out. Song Shi did not let go of the book. His eyes were still fixed on the book, and he waved his hand casually. He said to present this to the heir to the High Duke, who Guang Hui presented the cloth bag. Song Shi put down the book and waved his hand. Hu Guanghui stepped forward and handed it over. After Song Shi untied it, he took a look and directly poured a few jade tablets on the table. He looked at it and frowned. Hu Guanghui stretched his neck and smiled. Heir to the High Duke, what is this? Song Shi glanced at him and snorted. Can't you tell? I really can't tell. Hu Guanghui shook his head. I'm dull. Please enlighten me, heir to the High Duke. Old thing. Song Shi snorted and picked up a piece of jade. This one is from the governor of White Horse City. This one is from the governor of Limestone City. This one is from the governor of Raging Waves City, and this one is from the governor of Calming Sea City. Hu Guanghui frowned. Heir to the High Duke, did he go to several cities and ask the governors for it? Can you grow some brains? Song Shi face was gloomy and he said angrily, if someone asks you for this, can you give it? This is the most personal thing. These jade plates were personal things of people with status. They were used to ward off evil and suppress spirits. Even close people would not show it. Why would they give it to Chuli? Even if Chuli used the identity of Huai Public House, they would not give it. They could only steal it. How Chuli stole it aside, he wanted to show that if he stole it, it would be easy to take these people's lives. This was clearly a threat that couldn't be more obvious. Hu Guanghui quickly said, did he kill these governors? Give him 100 guts. Song Shi sneered. Hu Guanghui said, heir to the High Duke, do you want to call him over and ask? Let him in. Song Shi face became gloomier and snorted, I want to see what he wants to do. Hu Guanghui hurriedly went out, fearing that he would be angered by heir to the High Duke if he stayed any longer. Song Shi played with a few jade plates. His face was gloomy and his mind turned. A few days ago, his father was in the public house because he did not want to see Chuli. He did not want to shed all pretenses with the public house. There was a buffer for him to come forward. After all, he had a friendship with High Duke Seo. Now that his father was really not in the public house, the matter fell to him. How to deal with Chuli's threat was a problem. Chuli slowly walked into the hall, closed fist saluted and smiled. Heir to the High Duke, how have you been? Song Shi said coldly, sit. Chuli sat opposite him and took the teacup handed by the maid. He smiled and said, heir to the High Duke, what advice do you have? Surname Chu, what do you mean by this? Song Shi pointed to the jade plates on the table. Did you kill them? Chuli smiled and said, whether they live or die, it all depends on heir to the High Duke. Song Shi squinted his big eyes and sneered, how dare you? Chuli spread his hands and said, the Wang brothers dared to kill the governor of Chongming Road, but they are safe and sound. They are protected by the public house. I am also a scribe. It is not a big deal to kill a few governors. Aren't you afraid of the imperial house high officials? Song Shi scoffed. Chuli said, they have no evidence and can't find a witness. How can they say that I killed them? I am a witness, Song Shi said. Chuli smiled and said, heir to the High Duke saw me kill them with your own eyes? You can be biased and protect those who saw it with your own eyes, let alone those who didn't see it with your own eyes? Your public house is ready to shed all pretense of cordiality with us. Song Shi sneered, surname Chu, don't cause trouble for your public house. Chuli said, whether we are friend or foe, it all depends on High Duke Song. Bulsh *T. Song Shi shouted, do you believe that I will kill you now? Chuli shook his head and laughed. Heir to the High Duke's words sound familiar. Song Shi shouted, guards. Chapter 186. Chuli glanced at the four grandmasters and looked at Song Shi. Heir to the High Duke, do you really want to do this? Cripple him for me. Song Shi shouted. The 4 grandmasters immediately rushed towards Chu Li. Chu Li disappeared in a flash, and appeared behind Song Shiling. He gave him a light slap. Song Shiling had not reached the grandmaster's boundary, and he had never thought that Chu Li would dare to offend him. Due to his carelessness, his personal grandmaster was not by his side. Chu Li slapped him, and his body immediately froze. He could not move an inch, and several of his acupuncture points were sealed in an instant. Chu Li stood behind him, and quietly watched the 4 grandmasters. He smiled at the 6 pairs of angry eyes. "Surname Chu, how dare you?" Song Shiling flew into a rage and shouted, "If you dare to touch a single hair of mine, I'll make you die without a burial ground." Chu Li reached out to grab a strand of his hair and gently pulled it off. "I've touched a strand of your hair, what do you think?" "Kill him!" Song Shiling roared. Chu Li stretched out his hand and pressed on his shoulder. He smiled. "Before you kill me, the heir to the High Duke has to leave first. Shall we go to the underworld together? The one with the surname Chu." Song Shiling gritted his teeth and snorted. "Tell me, what are your conditions?" "I know that the heir to the High Duke will never agree to hand over the Wang brothers," Chu Li said. "Of course." Song Shiling snorted. The 2 Wang brothers were equivalent to 4 grandmasters. With the loss of 2 of them, the strength of Hawaii Public House was greatly reduced. Their vitality was greatly damaged, and they could not recover in a short time. Chu Li said, "I want to ask the heir to the High Duke to submit a memorial to ask for forgiveness and explain this matter clearly. As for how the Emperor will deal with it, it is not up to us to decide. With the ability of your Hawaii Public House, it is not difficult to get away." Song Shiling said coldly, "Impossible." Chu Li pressed on his shoulder. "Then I can only bring the heir to the High Duke away and go to my residence to discuss." "You think you can escape?" Song Shiling sneered. "You won't dare to do anything to me. Even if I go to the public house, no one can force me if I don't want to write." Chu Li said, "Heir to the High Duke was born noble. If you don't provoke me, I won't do anything to you." Song Shiling smiled smugly. Chu Li sighed. "At most, I'll take off the heir to the High Duke's clothes and walk around the town. I'm sure everyone will be happy to see that. In less than a month, the entire Ji dynasty will know of the heir to the High Duke's name." "Despicable!" Song Shiling snorted through gritted teeth. Chu Li smiled. "This is also forced by the heir to the High Duke. It is purely a helpless move." All right, Song Shiling said coldly. "I'll remember this." A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Chu Li was too daring. Since they dared to kidnap him, they were capable of anything. First, he would write it to deceive them. Then, when he was released, he would send out all the grandmasters in the residence. No matter what, he would kill him and take back this confession. "That's great." Chu Li smiled. He patted Song Shiling's back lightly. The acupoints on Song Shiling's upper body were immediately unsealed, and he could move again. However, his legs were still sore and numb, and he could not walk. Chu Li extended his hand. The 2 of them floated up and landed in front of the table by the window. Chu Li personally ground the ink. After grinding the ink, he stretched out his hand. "Heir to the High Duke, please." Song Shiling glared at him coldly. He picked up the brush and brewed without moving. Chu Li stared at the side and turned a blind eye to the 4 grandmasters with ghastly pale faces. They were in a dilemma and could not wait to slap Chu Li to death. Under their noses, they watched helplessly as he kidnapped the heir to the High Duke. Even if the heir to the High Duke did not bear a grudge, they were also sullen and felt ashamed of their position as high officials. Song Shiling put down the brush and wrote a full piece of paper in one go. He threw the brush out of the window. He stared coldly at Chu Li. "Are you satisfied?" Chu Li picked up the white paper and blew on it. He glanced at it carefully and nodded with satisfaction. He smiled. "Thank you, heir to the High Duke." Song Shi was expressionless. Can you let me go now? Of course. Chu Li smiled and patted Song Shi. Heir to the High Duke, we'll meet again. He disappeared on the spot. Song Shi shouted, Catch up with him. Get him back. Yes, the 4 high officials replied. They rushed out. Lu Yushu sat at the stone table under the peach tree and drank tea lazily. Elder Shiwu, sit down. Don't be so nervous. Shiwu's eyes looked around. I'm not thirsty. I'll just stand. Lu Yushu said, Elder Shiwu, he's not that scary. Shiwu said, Master, you shouldn't have provoked him. Humph, if I don't provoke him, will he be friendly to me? Lu Yushu curled his lips. Think about how many people he killed in our residence. Shiwu shook his head and said, This is something that lady should worry about. Master did not have to provoke him. Since I've already provoked him, I might as well offend him to death. Lu Yushu scoffed, He's not that great. Didn't he still get chased out of the residence? Sigh. Shiwu shook his head helplessly. Master was young and impetuous. He did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. He had never experienced Chu Li's power. The more he said, the more unconvinced Master was and wanted to compete. His words were counterproductive. It was best to shut his mouth. At this moment, Chu Li suddenly appeared in front of the two and smiled at them. You! Shiwu had goosebumps all over his body. His inner energy was running wildly. Chi! Chu Li's left hand threw out a cold light and instantly appeared in front of Shiwu. Shiwu knew the power of his flying dagger and dodged it. Chi! As soon as he dodged it, he heard another flying dagger shooting out. Master, be careful! Shiwu's eyes were about to crack as he shouted. The cold light from Chu Li's right hand instantly hit Lu Yushu and sent him flying into the air. Chu Li smiled at Shiwu and suddenly disappeared. Shiwu could not care about chasing Chu Li. He anxiously caught Lu Yushu, who was in the air. Lu Yushu's right chest was pierced by a flying dagger, but there was no blood. His face was pale and his eyes were at a loss. Shiwu hurriedly used his inner energy to protect his chest and hurriedly said, Master? Master? Lu Yushu slowly lowered his head and struggled violently. Shiwu quickly held him down. Master, don't move. I'm going to die. Lu Yushu stared at the flying dagger and shouted in panic, Am I going to die? Shiwu hurriedly said, Master, don't worry. You won't die. This is not a fatal wound. This dagger was on the right side. If it was on the left side, you might have died. Right side. Lu Yushu looked down and then grinned. Haha, it's the right side, it's the right side. This Chu Li is really stupid. Shiwu opened his mouth and closed it again. Lu Yushu laughed. He must have mistaken the right side as the left side. Such a fool is really strange. Shiwu took out a jade bottle and poured out a red pill and stuffed it into Lu Yushu's mouth. He quickly poked his chest a few times and suddenly pulled out the flying dagger. Surprisingly, the wound did not bleed. Shiwu looked down at the flying dagger. The flying dagger was chilling. It turned out that it was driven by the coldest inner energy. In this way, the wound was directly frozen and he would not die from excessive blood loss. Ha! Lu Yushu fell into the excitement of escaping death and laughed. The next time we meet, I must thank Chu Li properly. Thank him for not killing me, ha! His face was full of sarcasm and he laughed even louder. Sigh. Shiwu shook his head and sighed. He did not want to say more. Master was not stupid. After a while, he would be able to understand after calming down. Haha, this kind of fool actually caused the people in our residence to suffer heavy casualties? Little sister is too muddle-headed. Lu Yushu laughed. Shiwu could not bear it any more. Master, do you really think that Chu Li would make such a mistake? Chapter 187. Lu Yushu's laughter stopped abruptly. Elder Shiwu, what do you mean? Shiwu shook his head and said, Master, Chu Li's wisdom is comparable to Lady Xiao. Will he make such a mistake? Lu Yushu frowned. Isn't it? Shi Wu sighed. He deliberately showed mercy. His flying blade is steady, accurate, and ruthless. How can he make a mistake? Why should he show mercy? Lu Yushu frowned. Our public houses are enemies. He still showed mercy when he had the chance. He is not stupid. Shi Wu shook his head and sighed. Master, the key is your identity. Hee. Lu Yushu laughed. He won't dare to kill me, right? More or less. Shi Wu nodded. If he really killed Master, how can Lady Xiao not go crazy? He could imagine that once Master was killed, Ren Public House would retaliate wildly. Not to mention assassinating the Public House's Master and Lady, even the protectors would be out of luck. It would be a bloodbath. Just thinking about it sent chills down his spine. I thought he was brave. Lu Yushu shook his head and snorted. Just SOSO? Shi Wu sighed. He is brave but not brainless. Public House was not strong enough now. They were at a disadvantage against Ren Public House. After Chu Li appeared out of nowhere and turned the situation around, Ren Public House did not go all out against them. Lu Yushu was not convinced and laughed. Such a good opportunity and he let it go. Does he have a brain? Shi Wu said. Master, Chu Li is far smarter than you think. Not to mention anything else, can you guess Lady Zhao's thoughts? Little sister was born with a lot of ideas. I can't compare. Lu Yushu waved his hand. Shi Wu nodded and said, Lady Xiao sees him as a strong opponent. Do you think he is stupid? If it was me, I would not let go of this opportunity, Lu Yushu said. Shi Wu said, I think there must be a deeper meaning to his action. Sparing Master's life is not only a favor but also a warning to Lady Xiao. Warning? Lu Yushu was puzzled. Isn't it easy for Chu Li to kill Master? Shi Wu said, Lady Xiao Qi is afraid of harming the innocent. She does not dare to push the Public House too hard. According to Lady Xiao Qi's temperament, if she does not get rid of Chu Li, the Public House will be in trouble. She will not attack Public House again. Lu Yushu frowned and scoffed. We'll just stay in the residence. The public house may not be safe, Shi Wu shook his head. Lu Yushu scoffed. Looks like this Chu Li must be eliminated. Shi Wu nodded slowly. As long as Chu Li is not eliminated, we will not be able to eat or sleep in peace. I'll leave this to Miss to worry about. Haha, that's true. This kind of thing should be left to little sister. Lu Yushu laughed and said, You almost scared me to death just now. Let's go back early. Anyway, the marriage proposal is almost done. It's good to go back early, Shi Wu nodded. He was very wary of Chu Li. Chu Li appeared and disappeared mysteriously. Chu Li did not dare to kill the young master, but he was not afraid of him. Song Shilin paced around the hall with his hands behind his back. His chubby face was gloomy. From time to time, he would walk to the door to take a look, then come back and continue pacing back and forth. After a long while, a middle-aged guard strode in. Song Shilin hurriedly said, How is it? Did you catch him? The middle-aged guard looked honest and experienced. He said helplessly, Child, I can't find his shadow. Do you want to ambush him outside of Chongming Town? They desperately chased after him. In the public house, except for the two grandmasters who were in charge, the rest were sent out. There was no shortage of people with excellent light body technique, but they did not even see Chu Li's shadow. Either Chu Li was cunning and ran in another direction, or Chu Li's speed was too fast that they could not catch up. Huai Public House had many eyes and ears, almost everywhere, but they could not see Chu Li. As a result, the safest way was to rush to Chongming Town in advance and guard. Song Shilin frowned and said nothing. Go and guard outside Chongming Town. With Chu Li's light body technique, he could probably escape. In case he sent a signal to summon the grandmasters of the Public House, it would definitely be a chaotic battle. If it was any other time, if the grandmasters of the public house were sent over, they would definitely have the upper hand. They would not be afraid of the Public House. Now it was troubled times. 4 grandmasters went to White Stone Town, and the remaining 6 went to chase Chuli. But he had to get back that apology memorial. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble. Do as you said. Go outside Chongming Town, Song Shiling said fiercely. Yes. The middle-aged protector closed fist saluted. Just as he was about to go out, suddenly a loud laughter sounded behind him. He quickly turned his head to look. Chuli appeared out of thin air in the hall and smiled at Song Shiling. Heir to the High Duke still hasn't given up? Song Shiling's face suddenly changed and became gloomy. Surnamed Chu, you haven't left? Chuli smiled. I came back to take a look. What are you doing? Song Shiling said coldly. His whole body tensed up. He had a deep understanding of Chu Li's audacity. At the same time, he was secretly shocked and angry. The High Duke's public house was nothing but an empty shell. He had silently barged in, and no one had stopped him. Chu Li said, Heir to the High Duke still hasn't given up. You want to take back this apology memorial? Humph. Song Shiling snorted coldly. Chu Li shook his head and said, Heir to the High Duke, the apology memorial has been sent out. It is not in my hands. Song Shiling's face was pale. Chu Li said, Let me remind Heir to the High Duke that the Huai public house is empty now. I won't do anything, but the others might. See you later. He waved his hand and disappeared in a flash. Bah! Song Shiling picked up the teacup and smashed it on the ground. He shouted, Chu Li! The middle-aged protector was motionless like a statue. He did not dare to breathe loudly. They had neglected their duties as protectors to let Chu Li come and go as he pleased. Song Shiling sat down on the armchair. His face was livid and he was panting heavily. His anger surged and he couldn't suppress it no matter what. As the heir to the High Duke, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? If he did not take revenge, he would not be a human. After a long while, Song Shiling took a deep breath and said coldly, Elder Wu, call them back. There is no need to chase. Yes, Elder Wu quickly responded and left in a hurry. Ha 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 ha. Xiao Taiying held a piece of white paper and laughed. The midday sun shone brightly in the hall. Xiao Taiying, Shao Qi, and Chu Li were sitting in the hall. Lin Quan stood behind Xiao Taiying as if he did not exist. Awesome! Really awesome! Xiao Taiying laughed and passed the white paper to Shao Qi. He was overjoyed. I did not expect young Song's literary talent to be so good. I am ashamed, ha ha! Shao Qi took the white paper and glanced at it. She looked at Chu Li. To be able to force the heir to the High Duke to write this, he must want to eat your flesh. You have to be careful in the future. Yes, Chu Li smiled, but I did not kill him. He should be grateful. You are thinking too much. Shao Qi glared at him. Sai Yu. Xiao Taiying shook his head and laughed. You did not kill Lu Yushu. It is indeed rare. He thought that Chu Li would kill Lu Yushu with one slash. He was not afraid that Chu Li did not know the stakes. He was afraid that Chu Li would be impulsive. Killing the Imperial House high officials was also an action that would cause endless trouble. If it was anyone else, they would have to endure it. But Chu Li killed him. Shao Qi said, Lu Yushu also wants to eat you. Chu Li, your ability to make enemies is also unique. Sigh. I really did not expect the two families to unite by marriage. Xiao Taiying shook his head. The people from the imperial residence of King An will be here in 2 days. The smile on his face disappeared and he looked helpless. Shao Qi looked at Chu Li, second eldest sister, has not agreed to let you enter the imperial residence of King An. Chapter 188. Chu Li sighed. Is the second lady determined to marry into the imperial residence of King An? She has made up her mind. Who can persuade her? Xiao Qi looked at Xiao Taiying. Xiao Taiying looked helpless. I have persuaded her so many times, but it is useless. She has already attracted them. It is too late now. The marriage between King An and Xiao Shi was a verbal agreement. However, it was the Emperor and the High Duke who made the decision. It was the tacit agreement between the two parties. If it was not intentional, it could be ignored. But if one party wanted to follow, the other party could only follow. Chu Li frowned and did not say anything. He could understand the second lady's decision. The Yi public house was getting weaker day by day. The Rin public house and Huai public house had a marriage alliance. They were pressuring the Yi public house while the Yi public house was getting weaker. A marriage alliance with the imperial residence of King An could boost the morale of the Yi public house and stop the decline. Xiao Taiying said, Chu Li sigh. It has been hard on you. He believed that Chu Li loved Xiao Shi. If not, he would not have risked his life to save Xiao Shi twice. Chu Li sighed, now that it has come to this, we should try our best to persuade the second lady. I am really worried about her entering the imperial residence alone. Don't worry. Xiao Taiying scoffed, we cannot let her do this. Even if she does not agree, you have to follow her. Chu Li said, the second lady asked me to come back. I can't disobey her. I will write a warrant for you. Xiao Taiying scoffed, her words do not count. Chu Li nodded, that would be for the best. Xiao Qi glared at Xiao Taiying. What did Big Brother do earlier? If he had been forceful, things would not have come to this and attracted the people from the imperial residence of King An. Xiao Taiying said, Chu Li, take good care of second sister. She is also suffering. You too, he shook his head as he spoke. He felt sorry for Chu Li. It was too difficult for him. As a man of indomitable spirit, watching his beloved woman marry another man and having to follow her was really a kind of torture. Chu Li agreed to this matter because he had to endure humiliation. The bigger picture was important and he should be compensated. He turned his head and said, Little sister, Chu Li is now in charge of a courtyard by himself. Let's give him an island. Chu Li hurriedly waved his hand and smiled. Young Master Xiao Taiying. No, I don't dare. Giving an island to himself was completely different from being in charge of the island's affairs. It was truly giving the island to himself. Everything on the island belonged to him, and the High Duke's public house had no right to interfere. It was like a mansion within a mansion, and its status was completely different. It was a great temptation, but he did not want to leave the island of Jade Guardian. Living on the island of Jade Guardian was like living with Shao Qi. Whenever he wanted to see her, he could use the omniscient mirror to see her. His heart would feel empty if he did not see her for a day. It would be boring to live alone on an island. Shao Qi furrowed her brows and pondered. It's good to give him an island. Chu Li quickly said, My lady. Shao Qi said, You can't always stay on my island. Chu Li smiled. It's the most worry-free place for me to live. Moreover, Lady Xiao is about to leave the public house. Chief Steward Su has to go as well. The Jade Guardian Island can't be left unattended, right? That's true. Shao Qi nodded. Xiao Taiying smiled and said, How about this, I'll give you an island. You can live there, or you can live on the island of Jade Guardian. It's up to you. When you have time, you can choose it yourself. Let me know when you've decided on an island. Thank you, Master. Chu Li did not refuse anymore. This was indeed the highest reward for a scribe of the public house. He changed the topic. What should we do about the desolate mayor? Sigh. Xiao Taiying suddenly sighed. It's very troublesome. Why did the Wang brothers want to kill him? Chu Li asked. Xiao Taiying scoffed. The desolate mayor deserved to die. His son raped a girl. The girl's parents went to the public house to complain, but he was thrown into prison and tortured to death. He's lawless. Chu Li frowned. Shao Qi scoffed. The Wang brothers' actions are very satisfying. It's really. Chu Li said, if that's the case, in the memorial to the emperor, don't say that he was killed. Just say that he died of a disease. What do you think? Xiao Taiying touched his chin. That's a good idea. Let's do it this way. Then, we'll pass Xiao Song's memorial to the Emperor. The Emperor will probably pretend to be ignorant. This will protect the reputation of the House of High Dukes, Chu Li said. This will also be a warning to the mayors. If they act recklessly, we won't protect them. Good idea. Xiao Taiying laughed. These people are in charge of the town alone. No one restrains them. They often act recklessly. Those people from the martial arts world won't swallow their anger. We still have to help them. I'm sick of it. It's best to give them a warning. Xiao Qi frowned. This will also offend the mayors. If they offend them, so be it. Xiao Taiying scoffed. They won't dare to do anything. Chu Li said, My lady, when it comes to these mayors, we should mainly give them a warning. Let them have some scruples. Otherwise, if they act recklessly, the heavens will be angry and the people will resent them. It will ruin the reputation of the House of High Duke. That's right. Xiao Taiying slammed the table. We should have dealt with them long ago. Xiao Qi gently nodded and said no more. Chu Li returned to the courtyard. Xue Ling served him attentively. She made a table full of delicious dishes and served good wine. She filled the pot with wine and sat opposite Chu Li. A smile appeared on her cold face. Master, did you catch the murderer? Chu Li took a sip of wine and shook his head. Isn't it the Wang brothers? Xue Ling said. Master, you didn't catch them this time? Chu Li said, They are the high officials of the Huai public house. So, we can't touch them? Xue Ling scoffed. Of course, she knew how strong the power of the House of High Dukes was. Her master killed the high officials of the imperial house and was still safe and sound. It was just the mayors. Chu Li nodded. We can't touch them. Xue Ling pursed her red lips. Chu Li said, Do you know why Wang Zhongjing and Wang Zishu killed the desolate mayor? He explained the cause of the incident. Xue Ling frowned. The officials are not upright. They bully the people. They deserve to die. Chu Li put a piece of beef into his mouth and chewed slowly. Xue Ling scoffed. So, this matter is over? What if it's not over? Chu Li said, They are both in the wrong. It's not right to stand up for these people. It will also make the mayors unscrupulous. Moreover, the Huai public house has also given in. He told her what happened. Xue Ling looked at him helplessly. Master, why do you have to do this kind of offending people? Chu Li smiled. If I don't go, who will? If Master Xiao Taiying goes personally, High Duke Song won't dare to go too far. That's not necessarily true. Chu Li shook his head. If High Duke Song really makes things difficult for Master Xiao Taiying, then the House of High Dukes will lose all its face. High Duke Song is really too much. When a person dies, his friendship is gone. Chu Li sighed. He probably thinks that the High Duke is in danger. That's too disappointing. Xue Ling scoffed. Chu Li said, There must be an inside story. Outsiders don't know about it. Forget it, let's not talk about them. Is there anything big in the public house? Everyone is talking about the engagement between the second lady and Prince N. Xue Ling smiled. Everyone is very happy. Chu Li frowned. Xue Ling said, Prince N has a good reputation. He is also a prince. Everyone thinks that only he is worthy of the second lady. Moreover, if the second lady marries him, the Ren public house will not dare to mess around anymore. Chu Li sighed to himself and nodded. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Then, Su Ru pushed the door open. She was wearing an apricot gown and her pretty face was flawless. She fluttered to the pagoda. Chu Li, the second lady wants to see you. Chief. Xue Ling stood up to greet him. Su Ru waved her hand, indicating that there was no need to be overly polite. She carefully looked at Chu Li. Chu Li nodded and stood up to walk out. Chapter 189. P.S. To reassure everyone, a spoiler. King An will die, and the second lady will become a widow. End of report. P.S. I wanted to give everyone a surprise, but it turned out to be a scare. My bad, my bad. Chu Li stepped onto the small boat. The small boat floated on the surface of the water. A gentle breeze caressed his face. His blue robe fluttered in the wind as he fell into deep thought. Imminent Skyline was able to travel through the void, so he could arrive at the island of Symphony directly. However, he did not do so in the public house as he did not want anyone to know. The islands of the public house were separated by water, so it was much safer. If they knew that the imminent Skyline could ignore the lake water, they would definitely be worried and would not be able to sleep well. Chu Li guessed that the second lady had invited him over to talk about going to the imperial residence of King An. The small boat floated like a leaf, but its speed was extremely fast. In a short while, it arrived at the Symphony Island. A pretty maid was waiting on the shore. When she saw him, she curtsied and said, "Chief Chu, please follow me." Chu Li nodded. The delicate maid gracefully led the way. Chu Li asked, "How's second lady's mood?" "Miss has always been depressed." The delicate maid lowered her voice. "It seems to be because of the chief." Chu Li nodded and said no more. The two of them quickly entered the sea of flowers and arrived at the pavilion in the center. The pavilion was covered by a white veil. The white gauze fluttered gently in the wind, like mist or smoke. Inside the curtains, Xiao Shi was dressed in a white robe. She sat in front of a short table with her hands by her side. She was in a daze. The zither was glowing with a gentle luster. It was no ordinary item. "Miss, Chief Chu has arrived," the delicate maid reported softly. Xiao Shi turned around and waved. Chu Li entered the gazebo. His surroundings were covered by a veil, but it felt tranquil. "Have a seat," Xiao Shi pointed at the opposite stool. Chu Li closed fist saluted and sat down, quietly looking at Xiao Shi. Xiao Shi's facial features were as beautiful as a dream. People who looked at her could not help but sigh in admiration at the beauty of nature to create such a beauty. Xiao Shi sighed. "Chu Li, are you coming with me to the imperial residence of King An?" Chu Li nodded. "Are you really coming with me?" Xiao Shi asked. Chu Li replied, "Yes." Xiao Shi shook her head lightly. "I don't want you to go." Her bright eyes were like autumn water, quietly falling on Chu Li's face, observing his expression. "You've saved me twice. I don't want to thank you." He had fallen in love with her and sacrificed himself twice for love. If she thanked him, it would seem like she was being too polite and distant. It would break his heart. She was going to disappoint his infatuation. He had experienced too much pain and walked between life and death countless times. His heart was cold and numb. He was young, but his heart was old. She would not fall in love at first sight, nor would she fall in love with someone else. Even though Chu Li had sacrificed himself to save her, she was only slightly moved. She was not truly moved. Even if a man who was 10 times more handsome and intelligent than Chu Li appeared, she would not be tempted. Chu Li could only blame his fate for playing tricks on him. His heart had already died when he met Chu Li. This was too unfair to Chu Li. She also wanted to have him by her side to keep her at ease and not be so lonely and tired. However, she gritted her teeth and refused to budge no matter how her brothers and sisters tried to persuade her. She just did not want Chu Li to follow her. It would be too cruel to him. Chu Li said, "Second lady, I think you might have misunderstood." Xiao Shi looked at him with her limpid eyes. Chu Li sighed. This was a pair of eyes that could make any man lose himself. Not many men could resist. Chu Li calmed himself down and smiled. "I saved Lady Xiao Shi because it was my duty. I did my best. It was not because of personal feelings." "Oh." Xiao Shi's bright eyes still looked at him quietly. Chu Li knew that she did not give up and was dubious. He continued, "Actually, the person I like isn't Lady Xiao Shi." Xiao Shi's bright eyes did not blink. She wanted to see if he was telling the truth. Could it be that he was afraid that she would feel guilty, so he said it on purpose? Even if it was painful, he wanted to accompany her. To be with her, his love was too deep. In order to convince her, he would do anything and say anything. Chu Li's expression was calm. Their gazes intertwined in the air. Then who do you like? Xiao Shi said lightly. Chu Li hesitated and did not speak. Xiao Shi said, You're not trying to fool me, right? Chu Li shook his head. Xiao Shi let out a smile, then say it. Who is it? Chu Li said, Second lady, can you keep it a secret and not mention it to anyone else? Looks like it's someone extraordinary. Xiao Shi pursed her lips and laughed. All right, I'll keep it a secret for you. I won't mention it to anyone else. She knew that she was a loner and did not like people. She liked to be alone and hated people showing up in front of her. Chu Li was an exception. Maybe she was the least guarded against him. In front of Chu Li, she felt very relaxed. Chu Li said slowly, It's the third lady. Xiao Shi's eyes widened. Chu Li said, I like the third lady. Xiao Shi frowned and stared at him. Little sister? She was in disbelief. Little sister's beauty was not inferior to hers. Her temperament was a little less beautiful. She was indifferent and otherworldly. Men still liked women who were as gentle as water, like their own temperament. His little sister was cold, and did not have any femininity, so men could only forget about her. Chu Li nodded slowly, Yes. You really like little sister? Xiao Shi did not blink. Chu Li said, I like the third lady. You're not joking, right? Xiao Shi said. Little sister cultivated the heart technique of supreme oblivion. It cut off all emotional ties. When she chose to cultivate it, she had already made up her mind to be alone for the rest of her life. She would not be burdened by worldly affairs. She wanted to pursue the ultimate state of martial arts and become an enlightened master. If Chu Li really liked little sister, it was destined to be nothing. Chu Li said solemnly, How can I talk nonsense about this? Xiao Shi was still skeptical. From his expression, she could not tell if he really liked little sister or if he wanted her to give up and not feel guilty. She felt a little complicated and irritated. She said lightly, Little sister is pure and clean. She is indeed likable. But it's impossible for the two of you. Chu Li nodded. Yes, there's a difference in status. Xiao Shi waved her hand and interrupted him. It's not a problem of status. Chu Li smiled. I think it's a problem of status. If I can make a name for myself, I'll be worthy of the third lady in the future. You already have your own island, right? Xiao Shi said. Chu Li nodded. Do you know what this means? Xiao Shi asked. Chu Li shook his head. Xiao Shi smiled faintly. It means that your current status is not inferior to ours. Other than Big Brother, who will be a High Duke in the future, the three of us will be island owners. You're also an island owner, so you can be on the same level as us. So you're worthy of little sister now. There's no need for you to make a name for yourself. He still gave himself away. Everything he said was to convince her to agree to go to the imperial residence of King An with him. When he said that he liked little sister, half of it was true, and the other half was to accompany her. Chu Li sighed, Second lady, I want to go to the imperial residence of King An to broaden my horizons. That sounds like the truth. Xiao Shi scoffed. Chu Li said, The imperial residence of King An isn't our imperial residence. It's hard to avoid fighting and scheming. I can help a little if I go. I don't have any improper thoughts about you, Second lady. Don't worry, don't think too much about it. Xiao Shi rolled her eyes at him and scoffed. Seems like I'm not as good as little sister. Chu Li smiled awkwardly and did not deny it. I'm flattering myself. Xiao Shi waved her hand and scoffed. All right, you can go. Chapter 190. Just as Chu Li stepped onto the Jade Guardian Island, Suru hurriedly welcomed him and waved at him from afar. Chu Li smiled and fist saluted, then followed her to the third floor of the stargazing tower. Xiao Qi's white robe fluttered as her sword gleamed like water. Upon seeing him enter, Xiao Qi sheathed her sword. The dense sword energy was absorbed into the scabbard, leaving not a single trace behind. Chu Li exclaimed in admiration. Her swordsmanship had become more refined, and she was able to control and unleash it freely. When she moved, she could cover the sky and earth, but when she was still, she could return to nothingness. Shao Qi passed the sword to Su Ru and pointed her finger. The two of them sat on the garden stool, facing each other. How about it? Does second sister agree? Yes. You still have a way, Shao Qi said faintly. No matter how Big Brother and I tried to persuade him, it was useless. If that's the case, I can go without worries. Chu Li asked, when will the envoy from the imperial residence of King An arrive? Logically speaking, we should be able to arrive by noon tomorrow, Shao Qi said. Follow me to pick an island first. Chu Li nodded. Shao Qi said, there are still 20 islands left in the public house. You can choose any one of them. Some are big, some are small, some are far, some are close, but if it's too far, then forget it. All right, Chu Li replied. Shao Qi took the teacup from Su Ru and smiled. How did you convince second eldest sister? Chu Li smiled and said nothing. Shao Qi glared at him. All right, I won't ask. Also, I've gathered some information about King An's imperial residence. I'll have Su Ru send it to the Glories Will courtyard for you. You can take your time to read it and you'll know what's going on. Chu Li took the teacup from Su Ru and took a sip. Shao Qi said, let's go and choose an island then. She put down her teacup and Chu Li did the same. They left the stargazing tower together. Just as the three of them were about to board the ship, Chu Li said, oh right, bring Xue Ling along as well. You're quite attentive. Su Ru pursed her lips and smiled. Xue Ling is not in the courtyard. I think she has gone to the martial arts hall. Chu Li nodded. The three of them boarded the boat and headed east. After traveling for 30 miles, they reached a small island. The three of them went up to take a look. There was no one cleaning up the island. It was desolate and messy, with dense trees and weed. There was nothing beautiful about it, but it looked full of vitality. Chu Li glanced at it. He shook his head and rejected the idea. This island was big, but he didn't like it. Next, they looked at more than a dozen islands from far away to near. The last one was only 3 miles away from the Jade Guardian Island, located northeast of the island. Shao Qi pointed at the small island at the bow of the ship. I was planning to keep this island, but Big Brother said that it wasn't big enough and wasn't imposing enough, so he chose that side. You can go up there and see if you like it. Chu Li stepped onto the small island and activated the omniscient mirror. It was a circular island that was only half the size of the Jade Guardian Island. The island was covered in lush greenery. It was far better than the other islands. Spiritual qi surged in from all directions. He could feel the purity of the spiritual qi. There were a few giant trees that had exceptionally pure spiritual qi. It was obvious that they had lived for a long time and were not ordinary. The vitality of this island was more abundant than other places, and the ground was also full of spiritual energy. Chu Li nodded in satisfaction. Here then. This place. Shao Qi looked at him. Don't you think it's too small? This island was only twice the size of the East Garden, and because it was too close to the Jade Guardian Island, it was inevitable that it would be uncomfortable, so no one had chosen it yet. Chu Li said, it's useless if it's too big. It'll be more spacious if it's bigger, Shao Qi said. Chu Li shook his head. How much space can I take up if I live by myself? Shao Qi said, you live by yourself now, but what about in the future? Your women, children, and even grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren will all live here. When the time comes, it won't be enough. You'll regret it. That's right. Su Ru pursed her lips and smiled. This island will belong to you for generations. Chu Li smiled. Times change, we'll talk about it when the time comes. I'll choose this place. Young Su Ru, you can arrange the rest. Shao Qi turned her head and said, don't let Chu Li worry about these things. Yes, I'll find someone to clean it up and then find someone to build it. Su Ru said, I think we can live in it in half a year. Chu Li said, the chief still needs to follow me to Snow Lunar Pavilion. I'll do it myself. I'll bring Xueling along and teach her. After I leave, she'll take over. Su Ru smiled. In the future, these trivial matters will be handled by Xueling, Chu Li nodded. The next evening, the setting sun shone on the small courtyard. Chu Li sat in the pagoda and cultivated the sun-cultivating white tiger portrait. When the lanterns were lit, he ordered Xueling to go to the stargazing tower and ask if the messenger from the imperial residence of King An had arrived. He had a bad feeling about this. After Xueling left the courtyard, Chu Li stood up and left the pagoda. He stood in front of the Glory's will tree and looked up at the sky. Xueling quickly returned. She pushed the door open and entered with a serious expression. Master, the envoy from the imperial residence of King An has gone missing. Chu Li raised his eyebrows. Xueling said, the protectors we sent to lead the way have also disappeared. Where did you disappear? Outside Flying Bird City. Chu Li pondered for a moment. Flying Bird City was only 50 miles away. Young lady has already gone to Iron Eagle Island. Do you want to go and have a look? Xueling asked. Chu Li shook his head. Young master is not going? There's no point in going now, Chu Li said. Master Xiao Taiying is more experienced in dealing with these matters. Let's wait for news. Xueling scoffed. Master, you can really keep your composure. Xiao Taiying sat calmly in the main hall. He held a scroll in his hand and chatted with Xiao Qi. His current appearance was completely different from before. It was as if he had changed into a different person. He was calm and collected, talking cheerfully and wittily without a hint of worry. When it came to Xiao Shi, he was flighty and impatient. The disappearance of the envoy from the imperial residence of King An was a big matter, but he was calm and handled it with ease. Chu Li chose the island closest to the Jade Guardian Island? Xiao Taiying laughed. He's not greedy at all. Xiao Qi put down her teacup and said, I don't think he's at ease. Xiao Taiying laughed. Seems like he's not a utilitarian. After all, he's been influenced by Buddhism since he was young, Xiao Qi said. Tell Xiao Ru not to worry about the cost. Get the best one, Xiao Taiying said. We owe Chu Li too much. We need to compensate him. Xiao Qi nodded lightly. Xiao Taiying put down his scroll and took a sip of tea. Younger sister, this time it's probably the Ren public house's doing. It could also be the Huai public house, Xiao Qi said. They've been guarding outside the town for a few days and got nothing. They must be angry. Xiao Taiying said, Do they dare to kill? Xiao Qi frowned and muttered, Huai public house doesn't dare. After all, they just submitted a memorial to apologize. It's hard to say for the Ren public house. Lu Yurong is ruthless and will do it. If they kill the envoy from the imperial residence of King An, then we'll ruin their wedding, Xiao Taiying laughed. Let Chu Li do it. He'll definitely turn the world upside down. Xiao Qi shook her head and smiled. Big brother, you can still laugh. What's the use of a bitter face? Xiao Taiying laughed. I'm confident in Elder Zhao and the others. He had already sent Zhao Qingshan and the other 3 grandmasters to rescue them. The E-Public House had eyes and ears all over Flying Bird City. They would definitely find the envoy from the imperial residence of King An, Xiao Qi said. Second sister finally agreed. Chu Li's words are still the best. No matter what, he's still her savior, Xiao Taiying laughed. Her imposing manner has weakened a little. They're back. A report came from outside. Master, High Official Zhao requests to see you. Elder Zhao, please come in. Xiao Taiying raised his voice. Zhao Qingshan and the other 3 fluttered into the main hall. Their faces were gloomy. Xiao Taiying stood up to welcome them. Where are they? Master, we're a step too late. They've been killed. Zhao Qingshan sighed. Our public house's protectors are safe and sound. Xiao Taiying scoffed, "How vicious!" Chapter 191. Shao Qi asked, "The spirit blessing pill can't save them?" Zhao Qingshan shook his head with a heavy expression. "I was too late." Shao Qi looked at Xiao Taiying. Xiao Taiying muttered, "What about the things they brought?" "They were all robbed," Zhao Qingshan said. "Other than our protectors, no one can prove that they are from the imperial residence of King and." Xiao Taiying waved his hand and said, "Sit down and talk." Zhao Qingshan smiled bitterly. "Young master, we don't have the face to sit here. You can't be blamed for this." Xiao Taiying stroked his chin as he paced back and forth slowly. "Are the protectors in the mansion badly injured? Can you come over and talk?" Zhao Qingshan said, "They were knocked unconscious and don't know anything. They only suffered minor injuries." "Then let them in," Xiao Taiying said. Shao Qi said, "Lin Quan, call Chu Li over." "Yes." Lin Quan bowed and quietly left the room. Xiao Taiying looked at Shao Qi. Shao Qi said, "Chu Li is better than me when it comes to reading people's minds." Xiao Taiying nodded slowly. 4 middle-aged guards entered the hall. The 4 of them were in the prime of their lives and were all innate masters. But at this moment, they did not have the vigor of an innate master at all. They looked depressed and dispirited, as if they had just woken up from a hangover. They stood in front of Xiao Taiying and Xiao Qi with their heads lowered. Xiao Taiying and Shao Qi stared at them without saying a word. Zhao Qingshan and the other 3 did not speak either. The air seemed to have frozen, and it was so quiet that one could hear the sound of breathing. The 4 middle-aged guards unconsciously held their breath, and their hearts were in their throat. This time, they were ambushed and they could not stop it, causing the envoy from the imperial residence of King An to be killed. They could forget about getting the spirit blessing pill this year. The envoy from the imperial residence of King An was no ordinary person. After a cup of tea, Chu Li followed Lin Quan into the main hall, and closed-fist saluted. "Chu Li, sit down and talk," Xiao Taiying said. "The emissary from the imperial residence of King An was killed, but the 4 of them survived. Come and ask them what happened." Chu Li nodded. He looked at the 4 middle-aged guards. "Chief Chu," Zhao Qingshan said, "we found them in a residence in Flying Bird Town. The envoy from the imperial residence of King An was killed, and their acupuncture points were sealed. Unconscious." Chu Li nodded and looked at a middle-aged protector. "Senior Brother Shah, how many people are there in the ambush?" A square-faced middle-aged protector looked at Chu Li in surprise. He had never spoken to Chu Li before, so he did not expect Chu Li to know his name. "Do you know who's the strongest in martial arts?" Chu Li continued to ask, "Brother Shah." "Don't worry, think about it slowly." "The one with the strongest martial arts." Guard Shah frowned and thought for a moment. He looked at the other 3 and said, "There are 10 of them. The strongest one is about the same size as me. He's in his 70s. The distance between his eyes is very small and the space between his eyebrows is narrow." Chu Li had already seen the image in his mind. "There's a scar under his left eye, and his hands are exceptionally long. The teeth in the middle are a little black, right?" The guard surnamed Shah hurriedly nodded. Chu Li turned his head and said, "Master, they are the high official of the Ren public house." The guard named Shah hesitated for a moment. Chu Li said, "He introduced himself. Is he from the Huai public house?" "They seem to have inadvertently let slip that they're from Huai public house," said the protector with the surname Shah. Chu Li smiled. If he did not have the omniscient mirror, he would inevitably be deceived. At most, he would be dubious. He would never dare to conclude that it was the Ren public house. No matter how bold the speculation was, he could only speculate that it was the enemy of Huai public house who framed them. How would he think that it was the Ren public house who wanted to marry Huai public house? This Lu Yurong. Her method was really clever. She could not gain anything from him because she did not think of the existence of the omniscient mirror. Xiao Qi said, Lu Yurong wants to frame Hawaii Public House? Wanting to marry Hawaii Public House and still not forget to plot against Hawaii Public House, Xiao Taiying sneered and said, "This woman. She's really vicious." Xiao Qi looked at Chu Li. Chu Li slowly nodded, indicating that he could conclude. Zhao Qingshan said, "Then why not kill Protector Sha and the others?" If Protector Sha and the others were killed, Chu Li would not ask these questions. Xiao Taiying snorted and said, "Lu Yurong often kills many birds with one stone. Her calculation is very good. First, she wants to use Protector Sha and the others to frame Hawaii Public House and let us fight with Hawaii Public House. Second, she wants us to suspect Protector Sha and the others. She is suspicious and disturbing people's hearts. Third, she wants King An's imperial residence to suspect us. In short, she is so vicious." Xiao Qi pondered. "Can we use it to destroy their marriage?" "Good idea." Xiao Taiying clapped and laughed. "I will personally question Hawaii Public House." The heir to the High Duke of Hawaii Public House had just submitted a memorial asking for forgiveness. If he killed the people from King An's imperial residence, what would the imperial residents think? No matter how strong Hawaii Public House was, they would not dare to do this. They would definitely try their best to investigate this matter. It was inevitable that they would fight with Ren Public House. "Big brother, you want to go personally?" Xiao Qi frowned. Xiao Taiying said, "Chu Li can't do it." Heir to the High Duke Song's eyes turn red when he sees him. He won't listen to anything. If Elder Zhao and the others go, High Duke Song won't even see them. It's better for me to go personally. "High Duke Song will definitely embarrass you," Xiao Qi said. "Heir to the High Duke Song will also take the opportunity to retaliate. No matter how much they cross the line, they won't dare to kill me." Xiao Taiying smiled and looked at Chu Li. "This is all thanks to Chu Li." Chu Li's ghost-like light body technique was a great deterrent. Everyone understood that if anything happened to him, the heir to the High Duke would not be able to escape the assassination. The Ren Public House would also be assassinated. Chu Li said, "Master, you can't be careless. I'll go and return quickly. I'll leave the public house to you, third younger sister." Xiao Taiying's expression became solemn. "Let someone continue to investigate this matter." Xiao Qi saw that he had made up his mind and nodded gently. "Do you want Chu Li to follow?" "No need," Xiao Taiying laughed. "Chu Li will only spoil things if he follows. Elder Zhao and the others are enough." Chu Li said, "Master, High Duke Song is also an old fox. He may not be fooled. I don't expect them to turn hostile immediately. I'll stab them in the back first." Xiao Taiying laughed. "I should also have a good talk with High Duke Song." Chu Li slowly nodded. Xiao Qi said, "Protector Sha Qingshan, all of you go back and have a good rest. This matter ends here." Protector Sha Qingshan hurriedly said, "Third Lady, the envoy from the imperial residence of King An was dead, but they were still alive. Why? There must be a mole among them. Not only would outsiders think so, but they would also suspect it. Third Lady Shao Qi was responsible for the mole in the Qing Su public house. They wanted Shao Qi to investigate and prove their innocence." Xiao Qi said, "All of you are fine." Protector Sha Qingshan and the other three immediately let out a long sigh of relief and thanked her. Xiao Qi waved her hand and the four of them retreated. "Elder Zhao, we'll depart for the Hawaii public house tomorrow. You should prepare," Xiao Taiying said. "Yes." Zhao Qingshan and the other three also retreated. Only Chu Li, Xiao Qi, Xiao Taiying, and Lin Quan were left in the hall. "Chu Li, there's one more thing. I'll have to trouble you to go to the imperial residence of King An," Xiao Taiying muttered. Chu Li fist saluted. "Master, I'll do as you say." Xiao Taiying sighed. "About King An. I'll write a letter. You should personally deliver it to King An and explain it to him." Chu Li nodded. Lin Quan ground the ink. Xiao Taiying picked up the brush and thought for a while. Then, he dipped the ink and wrote 3 pages in one go. Lin Quan helped to dry it and put it in an envelope. He sealed it with wax and handed it to Chu Li. Co Taiying said, originally, a protector would be enough to deliver the letter. However, their status is not high enough. It'll be too disrespectful. Only you can do it. Moreover, you'll be entering the imperial residence of King An. It'll be good to take a look in advance. Chu Li took the letter and kept it in his arms. I'll leave now. Co Chi frowned. King An will inevitably be angry. Just ignore him. Chu Li smiled and nodded. He fist saluted and left Iron Eagle Island to return to the small courtyard. Schweling complained while packing, Master, why does this kind of task always fall on you? You're such a bully. Chu Li smiled, don't say that. You don't need me to deliver a normal letter. It's not good news. The imperial residence of King An will definitely not be happy. Schweling packed the bag quickly and handed it to Chu Li. You'll definitely be bullied if you go. Chapter 192. Chu Li stood outside the fairy's capital and looked at the towering city. This was an old city that had existed for thousands of years. For thousands of years, in this city, there had been countless tragedies of separation and reunions, the destruction of nations, the rise and fall of prosperity and decline. The city wall was 100 meters high, like a 30-story building in the future. Covered the sky and the people were like ants. The bricks of the city were covered with moss and retained the traces of time. Chu Li stood under the city and looked at it for a while. He led his horse into the towering city gate. The guard looked at his waist tag and waved his hand to let him go. As soon as he stepped into the city, he was greeted by the hustle and bustle of the city. There were hawkers, bargaining sounds, laughter, and curses. He led his horse and walked slowly through the crowd. After walking for 5 miles, there was another tall and mighty city gate in front of him. This was the inner city gate. The inspection was stricter. There were more than 10 guards at the gate. All of them were spirited and sharp. They were all people who had been on the battlefield. Chu Li had the scribe waist tag of the House of High Dukes. He walked for more than 10 miles and finally arrived in front of a tall imperial residence. There was a plaque on top of the gate. Imperial Residence of Prince An was hung. The 3 big words were shining in gold. The gate was covered with yellow glazed tiles. The 10-meter-tall gate was painted red and shiny. The rows of copper nails were shiny. Under the tall gate, the 4 scribes in front of the gate seemed short, but their eyes were like lightning. They stared at Chu Li and his horse coldly. Chu Li first tied the horse to the hitching post at the side and walked to the steps of the public house's entrance. He closed fist saluted and said in a clear voice, Rank 2 scribe of the public house, Chu Li, has been ordered to deliver a letter to King An. His voice was calm, but it slowly spread out. The entire imperial residence could probably hear him. The 4 scribes stared at him coldly. They thought his voice was too loud. A small door opened and a middle-aged man in embroidered clothes walked out. He stood on the steps and looked at Chu Li. He asked calmly, The public house? Chu Li nodded, yes. Give me the letter. The middle-aged man in embroidered clothes slowly extended his hand. His face was like jade. He was handsome and had an elegant temperament. He was like a well-read middle-aged Confucian scholar. He did not look like a gatekeeper. Chu Li sighed. The gatekeeper of the imperial residence was also extraordinary. He took out the letter and walked up 9 steps to the man. He handed over the letter. The middle-aged man took the letter and glanced at it. He said lazily, Since it's from the public house, come in. Chu Li gave a fist salute. The middle-aged man entered the small door lazily, and Chu Li followed behind him. He did not bat an eyelid at his rudeness. He would teach him a lesson when he entered the imperial residence of King An in the future. Now was not the time to act up. The middle-aged man entered the residence and waved his hand to summon a delicate and pretty maid. Arrange a guest room for this person from the public house. Yes, Chief Zhu. The delicate maid responded respectfully and curtsied at Chu Li. Young master, please follow me. Chu nodded and smiled. He activated the omniscient mirror to look at Chief Zhu and secretly raised his eyebrows. Indeed, he was not a gatekeeper, but the chief of the external residence of the imperial residence. When he heard Chu Li's self-introduction, when he heard that they were from the E-Public House, he personally came out to see how the scribes from the E-Public House looked like. Chu Li followed the maid through a moon-shaped door and arrived at a small courtyard. He activated the omniscient mirror and stared at Chief Zhu in his mind. He watched as he passed through 3 courtyards and arrived at a spacious and empty courtyard. He stopped at the white jade steps in the main hall and said respectfully, "Your Royal Highness, a scribe from the E-Public House is here to deliver a letter." Chu Li saw it in his mind. In the study room of the main hall sat a middle-aged man in his 40s. His square face was sallow and sickly, and he had a straight nose. He had triangular eyes and an ordinary appearance. He gently stroked the 3 strands of whiskers on his chin and thoughtfully stared at a book. Chu Li smiled at the maid and sat at the stone table in the courtyard. He took a sip of tea and knew that this middle-aged man was the 4th son of the prince, King An. His omniscient mirror also saw it. Looking at the spacious and empty courtyard, there were 10 grandmasters standing in the dark, protecting King An in the middle. These grandmasters were not inferior to Zhao Qingshan and the others. They hid in the dark like statues, motionless. Other than that, there were no maids in the courtyard, only King An put down the book and opened the window. From the E-Public House? Yes, Chief Zhu softened his voice and said respectfully, "Rank 2 scribe, Chu Li personally delivered the letter. No matter which residence, be it the House of High Dukes or the Imperial residence, the scribes were all rank 9. Rank 2 was already an impressive rank. As the chief of the outer residence, he was only a rank 4, but that young boy was actually a rank 2. However, even if he was rank 4, he was still a rank 4 of the Imperial residence, which was more honorable than the House of High Dukes. Naturally, he did not have to bow down to this boy. Rank 2 scribe. It should be an important letter. Bring it up, King An said lightly. Chief Zhu walked to the window under the plum tree and presented the letter with both hands. King An tore open the seal and took it out to read it slowly. His sallow face became darker and darker, causing Chief Zhu to tremble. "Heh!" King An slammed the window frame and sneered. Chief Zhu carefully raised his head. King An scoffed, "Elder Zhu, your brother is dead." "What?" Chief Zhu was shocked. He quickly said, "How could this be? He was killed halfway." King An sneered, "It seems that he did not respect me, King An." Chief Zhu's face darkened. "Your Royal Highness, I only have this one brother." All right. I thought it was a good job, but it turned out to be a job that would cost one his life. Who can you blame?" King An impatiently waved his hand. "Weren't you the one who begged me to put your brother in? Your Royal Highness, who did it?" Chief Zhu's eyes were spitting fire as he gritted his teeth. Heir to the High Duke said that it was the Ren Public House. King An sneered, "You can only believe half of it. Go and call the scribe here." "Yes," Chief Zhu said in a deep voice. Chu Li activated the omniscient mirror to its limit and looked at King An's mind. King An watched Chief Zhu leave and threw the letter on the table. He sneered and shook his head. Chu Li was shocked and frowned. The imperial residence of An had planted an informant among the messengers. He informed the Ren Public House and used the Ren Public House to kill the messengers. The goal was to not marry Xiaoshi. It was a taboo for the Royal Highness to have a marriage with the High Duke's public house. Moreover, it was the position of the princess. Once he ascended to the throne, the princess would become the empress. The E-Public House would become a powerful force that would be difficult to control. More importantly, there was no need to mention the empress. If he married the lady of the E-Public House, he would not have any hope of inheriting the throne. He would not be able to become the emperor. As a prince, he was only one step away from the position where life and death were in his hands. How could he be willing to do that? Therefore, he did everything he could to destroy it. Killing the messengers in the public house was only the first step. There were more methods. If it did not work, there was still the last step. He heard that Seosher's health was not good. If she died of illness, no one would say anything. He could also cut off the connection with the public house. Chuli sat by the stone table and frowned. He was furious. As expected of the royal blood, his nature was cold and heartless. The younger brother of the chief of the outer residence was sacrificed without hesitation in order to avoid suspicion. Such a temperament was really disappointing. Compared to him, the public houses Seo Taeying, Seo Shur and Seo Chi were like naive children. If they really fought with him, they would not be his match. Chapter 193. The pretty maid's colorful dress fluttered as she gracefully came to the small courtyard. She said in a low voice, "Imperial bodyguard Chu, His Highness invites you." Chuli restrained his anger and nodded with a smile. "Thank you." He followed the maid out of the small courtyard. After passing through the moon gate, he saw Chief Zhu. Chief Zhu lazily waved his hand. "Follow me." Chuli fist saluted and did not say anything else. He sighed to himself, for the second lady to marry such a cold and heartless king and who only had the power of the throne, it was no different from a little white rabbit sending herself to the mouth of a big bad wolf. He smiled bitterly. He could only blame the second lady for being foolish, but even more so for her bad fate and bad luck. Who would have thought that Prince En, who was known for his good reputation, was such a character? He had met the wrong person. It was just like how he met a swindler or a drunk driver in the future. His luck was bad, but he couldn't do anything about it. He was angry and pitiful at the same time, wishing he could scold the second miss to her face. Chief Zhu said slowly, "Let me tell you about His Royal Highness's rules, lest you make a mistake and blame it on your public house." Chuli said, "Please guide me, Chief Zhu." Cough. Chief Zhu coughed softly and cleared his throat. He said lazily, "Our His Highness likes peace and quiet. He does not like loud noises, and does not like people disturbing him and delaying his studies." "Yes." Chuli nodded. No wonder there was no one outside his study. It seemed like he was very sensitive to sound. This showed that he was constantly in a state of anxiety, impatience, and depression. This kind of person was the easiest to anger. Chief Zhu continued, "His Royal Highness is the most approachable, but he hates deceit the most. Take the people in the residence for example. If they make a mistake, they will not be severely punished if they tell the truth. If they lie, they will be banished from the residence and will never be able to use them again." Chuli nodded. He understood what Chief Zhu meant. He wanted him to tell the truth and not hide anything. The death of the messenger from the imperial residence is the responsibility of the High Duke's public house, isn't it? Chief Zhu's voice was still lazy, but his gaze suddenly became sharp. Chuli sighed. "We are responsible for this. I was too careless. I thought that no one would dare to touch the people of the prince's mansion, so I didn't send too many experts to escort them. My mansion is still looking for the murderer. I will definitely punish the murderer and avenge the prince's mansion's envoy." "Humph!" Chief Zhu sneered. "He's already dead, what's the use of revenge?" Chuli said, "These people are so brave. They dare to kill people from the imperial residence today. They will dare to do it tomorrow." Chief Zhu frowned and said, "Isn't the Chongming Road peaceful? How could something like this happen? You guys are fans of Taiping, right?" Chuli sighed. "It's precisely because it's peaceful that I didn't expect the envoys of the imperial residence to be killed. In any case, you're right," Chief Zhu said coldly. Chuli smiled and said nothing more. Chief Zhu was scheming and sinister. He kept trying to accuse the High Duke's public house. Chuli could only react accordingly and defend himself. The two of them arrived at the spacious courtyard, King An's study room. Your Highness, I've brought him here. Chief Zhu softened his voice. Before Chu Li even stepped into the courtyard, all the hairs on his body stood on end. He immediately put himself into a state of wilting. It was as if he had yet to recover from his injuries. The Grandmasters in the dark had formed a threatening aura, as if they were subtly warning him. Come in. King An's voice was heard. Chief Zhu walked up the steps and gently pushed the door open. The wooden door turned and opened silently. He bowed respectfully, a stark contrast to his previous neglect. Chu Li stepped into the hall and closed-fist saluted. King An sat steadily in the armchair. He was dressed in a bright yellow robe. Even though his face was sallow, he still looked sick. He did not lose his luxurious bearing. He held a celadone teacup and looked at Chu Li from head to toe. His bright eyes seemed to be able to see through his heart. Chu Li slightly lowered his eyes and stood quietly. The omniscient mirror was activated. King An put down his teacup and said lightly, I heard that your second lady's body is getting better. Is that true? Chu Li said, Yes, the second lady's body is getting better. She has already recovered. King An stared at him with a threatening gaze. She has been sick since she was young. How did she recover so quickly? Chu Li said, I found a longevity grass in the public house. Oh, longevity grass. King An nodded slowly. His eyes flashed. Chu Li's heart sank. He finally solved one of his doubts. The vitality sealing finger was actually performed by King An. At that time, King An was in his 20s. When the second lady was born, he ran to the public house to observe and secretly performed the vitality sealing finger. It was so vicious that it made people's hearts go cold. King An said lightly, I heard that she was hit by the vitality sealing finger. I am good friends with your heir to the High Duke. When he was young, he stayed in my public house for a while. Iron Eagle found my father. My father was in isolated cultivation. I helped to beg the Empress. In the end, she sent a high official from the imperial house. Has it been cured? Chu Li sighed. No wonder the second lady was stupid. King An was a good friend of the eldest master. He knew that the eldest master did not have a good impression of King An. At first, he thought it was purely an instinctive aversion to his brother-in-law. He did not look into it. Now that he thought about it, perhaps the eldest master also knew that King An was not appropriate. Unfortunately, as the elder brother, he could not control his younger sister. It was just like how parents could not control their children. Chu Li said, The second lady is blessed by the heavens. It has been cured. Has your Royal Highness seen the third lady? Young Qi? She is an eccentric girl. She likes to stay alone since she was young. I have never seen her. Good. Congratulations. King An stroked his beard and smiled. Then I am relieved. Thank you, Your Royal Highness. Chu Li said, This time the envoy was killed. It was my public house's fault for not thinking things through. We should have sent a few grandmasters to escort them. What he meant was that King An should have sent a few grandmasters to escort them. He sighed to himself that the second lady's fate was indeed not good. King An did not encounter Xiao Qi, who showed her true colors. King An waved his hand. This matter cannot be blamed on you. The public house would not go so far as to kill the envoy of the imperial residence. If you are not willing, just say the word. I will not force you. Chu Li smiled. Your Royal Highness has a good reputation. To be able to marry you, everyone in my public house is elated. No one is unwilling. King An's words were harsh. It seemed like the public house was unwilling to accept this marriage. They wanted to kill the envoy of the imperial residence to stop the marriage. Of course, he could not admit to this. King An stroked his beard and nodded. Then I am relieved. I never force people to do things against their will. The second lady's beauty is unparalleled. To be able to marry into the imperial residence, I am also very happy. Thank you, Your Royal Highness. Chu Li closed fist saluted. Iron Eagle's letter said that the killer was the Ren public house? King An said faintly. Chu Li said, yes, they originally wanted to frame the Hawaii public house. Coincidentally, one of the protectors of the public house recognized a killer. It was the high official of the Ren public house. What a coincidence. King An smiled. Chu Li nodded. Man proposes, God disposes. If Hawaii public house suffers from this injustice, their vitality will be greatly damaged. Didn't the Ren public house want to unite by marriage with the Hawaii public house? Why did they do this? Two tigers on the same mountain. Presumably, there will be a clear winner. Sigh. They spent all their efforts on this. No wonder there are always people from the martial arts world causing trouble. King An stroked his beard and shook his head. He sighed. They have forgotten the original intention of the establishment of the High Duke's public house. The people from the martial arts world causing trouble can't be blamed on the High Duke's public house. Chu Li shook his head and said sternly, these town guards use their power to oppress the people and do whatever they want. The imperial court does not impose checks and balances, which makes them more lawless and provokes the wrath of the people. Anyone with a backbone will not be able to tolerate it. King An frowned. Aren't you exaggerating? Chu Li said, this time, the desolate town guard was assassinated. I think the imperial court already knows that it was the high official of the Hawaii public house who did it. The two heroes of the Wang family, King An said faintly. Chu Li said, as the high official of the High Duke's public house, they know the severity of the situation. The town guards can't be killed, but why do they still go to the mountain knowing that there are tigers on the mountain? It's intolerable. If they are like this, what about the chivalrous people from the martial arts world? King An stroked his beard and smiled. Listening to this, you seem to be standing on the side of the martial arts world? Chu Li said sternly, on the contrary, I am worried for the imperial court. If this continues, the great Ji dynasty will be unstable. As a prince, your royal highness should understand the principle that water can carry a boat, but it can also overturn it. The people's resentment is boiling. How can the world not be chaotic? Then what do you have to do? King An stroked his beard and smiled disapprovingly. The official law was like a furnace and the people were like iron. Those ants could not make any big trouble. Chu Li said, they have equal power. The town guards have too much power. The imperial inspector is just a decoration. They often collude with each other and deceive their superiors. If we can increase the power of the imperial inspector, they can compete with the town guards. It will not be easy to collude with them, and it will be easier for the imperial court to control. King An was deep in thought. Chu Li still had a trump card. He did not want to mention it, which was to add another person. Division of power. Once this suggestion was made, the official position would naturally increase. All the officials in the world would have to respect the person who made the suggestion. He did not want King An to get the credit. Of course, this is just a humble person's opinion. It does not enter the eyes of the Fong family. Your Royal Highness, please don't laugh at me. Chu Li said. King An stroked his beard and waved his hand. As expected of a rank 2 scribe. Your knowledge is not bad. The high-ranking officials in the imperial court could look down on the world from above. As a scribe, Chu Li had such knowledge and experience. It was rare and commendable. This world was similar to the Tang dynasty. For tens of thousands of years, the political system was stable. Chu Li came from the current world. The frequency of dynasty changes was much higher than in this world. Chu Li subconsciously picked up the crystallization of history. He felt that it was common knowledge. But here, he seemed to have extraordinary knowledge. This time, I sent someone over to teach the second lady the rules of the palace, so that she won't become a laughing stock when she enters the imperial residence. King An stroked his beard and smiled. The second is to set the date of the marriage. Mother has already asked the imperial astronomer to calculate it. March of next year is the most suitable date for the wedding. March of next year? Chu Li muttered. It was only September. There were still 6 months until March. The delay of half a year was bound to bring trouble. It turned out that the Empress was satisfied with Xiao Shi. King An had to marry her. He could only resort to underhanded means. He looked up at King An. He was furious. He wanted to kill him with a slap. The devil is 10 times stronger than the righteous. The human heart is so vicious. No matter how cold Xiao Shi was, she would never lose her innocence. If she really entered the imperial residence, she would be like a lamb in a tiger's den. Compared to King An, Xiao Shi wanted to sacrifice herself to let the House of High Duke take a breather. How childish, how silly, how pathetic! Thinking of this, Chu Li's anger grew. Under the omniscient mirror, no matter how angry he was, he would be able to calm down. Is your Royal Highness feeling unwell? Chu Li pretended to be concerned. His tone was sincere. Your Royal Highness doesn't look too good. King An's complexion was sallow and sickly. He was a grandmaster. Chu Li had already seen through the omniscient mirror that there were 2 forces entangled in his body. King An was constantly using his heart technique to fight against this inner energy. He could not get rid of it. King An waved his hand. It's just a small injury. It's no big deal. How does Iron Eagle plan to deal with this? Chu Li smiled. I'm only here to deliver a letter. I don't know anything else. King An said, I'll reply to Iron Eagle and send a few more people over. You can go back first. Chu Li said, Yes, then I'll take my leave. King An stroked his beard and nodded. He picked up the celadone teacup. Chu Li closed fist, saluted and left. He turned around and returned to the courtyard. He was not in a hurry to leave. This was a rare opportunity. He wanted to find out more about the imperial residence and find a way to kill King An. If King An did not die, Xiao Shi would not be able to escape. He had no other choice. Although the imperial residence was huge, King An spent most of his time in the study. He read, meditated, and suppressed the strange energy in his body. Chu Li used the omniscient mirror to see his heart technique circulating. The heart technique cultivated by the imperial family was top secret. It was not spread to the world. Chu Li tried to circulate King An's heart technique to try and find its weakness. Chapter 194. The lights in the small courtyard were as bright as day. Chu Li sat quietly at the stone table, reading a book. There was a pile of books on the stone table. The guest house of the imperial residence of Prince An was different from the Huai public house. The courtyard was decorated elegantly and quaintly, comfortable but not luxurious. There was no aggressive atmosphere of wealth. The biggest difference was the study room with thousands of books. He had read all the books in the public house's library, while most of the books in the guest house of the imperial residence of Prince An were not available in the library. Chu Li was like a thirsty person who saw a sweet spring. His heart was itching. At this time, a pretty maid in a colorful dress came over with a faint fragrance. She curtsied. Master, do you want to have dinner? Yes, thank you. Chu Li smiled and nodded. The maid smiled sweetly. What do you want to eat? This is the menu. If it is not on it, you can ask the catering department to make it. As she spoke, she handed over a small booklet that was filled with the names of dishes. Chu Li ticked a few and smiled. Please ask Chief Zhu to come here. Yes, the maid smiled sweetly. Her smile was like a flower. The original delicate face added a bit of beauty, charming and moving. Chu Li smiled and nodded without saying anything. He laughed in his heart. Which girl did not want to fall in love? This maid took a fancy to him. Although Prince An was cold and vicious, he was very good at pretending. His temperament was hidden deep inside and appeared kind on the outside. He was tolerant and peaceful to the servants. The atmosphere in the residence was strict but lively. In terms of heart, he was indeed an ambitious person. As the maids in the guest house of the imperial residence, they usually did not have many things to do. The guests of the imperial residence of Prince and did not dare to be rude to them. Therefore, most of them were lively and full of hope for life. They did not know the dark side of the human heart. Chief Zhu came quickly. His brocade clothes were shining under the light. He entered the small courtyard and closed fist saluted. He was lazy and indifferent, scribed Chuli. Are you looking for me? Chuli smiled and invited him to sit down. Chief Zhu was jealous of Chuli and extremely arrogant. He looked sloppy. I have a lot of things to do, cried Chuli, just say what you want. Chuli smiled, Chief Zhu. We are not outsiders. I will follow the second lady into the imperial residence in the future. We should be closer in the future. He wants to follow us? Chief Zhu's expression changed slightly. Chuli nodded. The public house will naturally not allow the second lady to enter the public house alone. As the second lady's scribe, I have to follow her. Please take care of me, Chief Zhu. Chief Zhu forced a smile and cupped his hands in obeisance. Not at all. It's me who asked Imperial Bodyguard Chu to take care of me. The ranks were universal in the Ji dynasty. The Imperial Court, the High Duke's public house, and the Imperial residence all had the same standards. A rank 2 scribe from the High Duke's public house would be rank 2 even if he entered the Imperial residence. Chief Zhu was only rank 4 and would have to bow to Chuli when he saw him. Chuli waved his hand and smiled. The second lady will become a princess, and I will become a scribe of the Imperial residence. There's no need to stand on ceremony. Yes, yes. Don't regard me as an outsider. Chief Zhu forced a smile and nodded. His mouth was full of bitterness. Chuli said, "Oh right, I have a small request." Chief Zhu perked up and said with a smile, "Please speak. I want to stay in the mansion for a few more days." Chuli pointed at the study room. He shook his head and smiled. "I'm a bookworm. When I see the books here, I really can't move. I want to finish reading them before I leave." This. Chief Zhu hesitated. He smiled. "It won't delay your official business, will it?" Chuli waved his hand. "There are only a few books here that are not in the High Duke's public house's library. It won't delay me for a few days. Besides, my task has been completed. It doesn't matter when I go back." "That's fine. Scribe Chuli can do as you please." Chief Zhu smiled. "As long as it doesn't delay Scribe Chuli's official business, the Imperial residence will not be stingy with a few meals." Chuli smiled. "Thank you, Chief Zhu." "You're welcome." Chief Zhu smiled and stood up. "If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. There's still something I need to deal with. Please. I'm really sorry for troubling Chief Zhu to make this trip." Chuli stood up to send him off. He eagerly sent him to the entrance of the courtyard. Chief Zhu secretly scolded Chuli for being hypocritical. What was there to feel sorry about? However, his face was full of smiles. He did not dare to neglect Chuli. If Chuli really entered the imperial residence, as the princess's personal scribe, his power would be far beyond that of a chief of the outer residence. If Chuli really entered the imperial residence, as the princess's personal scribe, his power would be far greater than that of a chief of the outer residence. If Chuli wanted to make things difficult for him, all he had to do was say something and there would be countless people looking for trouble. Not long after Chief Zhu left, the maids came in 3 times and laid out a table full of dishes. Chuli drank and ate leisurely, but in his mind, he was sizing up Prince and spent almost all of his time in the study room, reading, writing a few strokes of calligraphy, cultivating diligently and regularly. He was not extravagant like the people thought, feasting every night, laughing and dancing. Princeton was ambitious and had strict self-discipline. Moreover, he was plagued with internal injuries, so he dared not indulge his desires. If he was even slightly careless, he would be swallowed by the strange inner energy. Chuli was very curious about whose inner energy this was. This inner energy could restrain Princeton. After he finished his meal, he leisurely strolled out of the courtyard and came to an exquisite garden. Lanterns were everywhere, illuminating the garden brightly and gently. It was like a dream. He looked like he was admiring the flowers, but he was actually studying Prince Anne's heart technique. After 10 circulations, he did not feel that this heart technique was profound. After 20 circulations, he faintly felt that there was something special about it. After 30 circulations, the special was even clearer, and the inner energy was abnormally pure. He felt that it was wonderful, so he kept circulating it. The feeling became clearer and clearer. He did not know what heart technique this was, but it was better than the infinite azure sea. It was as thick and pure as the infinite azure sea. It was indeed a secret inheritance of the imperial family. He did not want to change to this heart technique. After all, he did not know the ins and outs. Moreover, the infinite azure sea was almost instinctive. It was circulating at any time and anywhere. If he changed to another heart technique, it would be twice the effort with half the result. It was better not to change at all. However, at a crucial moment, circulating this heart technique to kill an enemy could conceal his identity. After wandering around the garden for half an hour, he returned to the guest house. After washing up, he picked up a book and sat on the bed. The maids also left. He found a dark green robe from his bag. After changing into it, he fluttered out of the courtyard and walked around the imperial residence. The imperial residence was heavily guarded and filled with masters. His body was in the withered state of the scripture of life and death. He was like a piece of dead wood, yet he blended in with heaven and earth. Even a grandmaster would not be able to sense it. The omniscient mirror could shine 5 miles away. He was able to avoid any attacks and successfully walked around the imperial residence. He had a clear view of the imperial residence. There were 15 grandmasters hidden in the imperial residence. They were far more powerful than the High Duke's public house. The existence of the High Duke's public house was to suppress the martial arts world. The imperial residence did not have such a mission. They were just protectors. However, they were stronger than the High Duke's public house. It was obvious that many masters were privately recruited by King An. He suppressed the thought of assassinating King An was a grandmaster. With the grandmasters protecting him, it would be difficult to assassinate him. If he wanted to kill King An, he had to become a grandmaster as soon as possible. It was strange that King An could become a grandmaster. Logically, he could not join any faction. If that was the case, the imperial family also had the surpassing state. Chu Li's figure fluttered. He wandered around the imperial residence of King An for 2 rounds. He kept an eye on King An lived alone. He did not sleep with the concubine. In the middle of the night, King An suddenly got up and left his bedroom. He walked into a courtyard with weapons. There were no protectors around him. This courtyard was specially used for martial arts training. There was a training field in the middle of the courtyard. There were several weapon racks beside it. There were no protectors guarding the courtyard. It was completely unguarded. King An passed through the training field and entered the east wing. There was a simple tripod in the east wing. It was as tall as 2 people and as wide as 1 person. It was green with bronze embroidery, covering the rough patterns. Chapter 195. Chu Li was shocked. He watched as King An sat cross-legged in the ancient cauldron and closed his eyes to channel. The ancient cauldron was over his head, making him feel like he was in a well. Prince Anne's inner energy surged like a torrent. Its speed was 10 times faster than usual. In the blink of an eye, it suppressed the heterogeneous inner energy, causing it to shrink into a ball. His surging inner energy flowed through his meridians faster and faster. Chu Li raised his eyebrows and activated the omniscient mirror. It was as if there were strands of golden hair floating in the cauldron, like a lingering mist. The strands of hair floated into the center of Prince An's brows, and his inner energy flowed faster and faster. Chuli activated the omniscient mirror again and vaguely saw an invisible force coming from the void. It was like fog or smoke. The ancient cauldron sucked it in like a whirlpool and turned it into golden strands of hair that gathered inside the ancient cauldron. Chuli knew that these strands of golden hair were spiritual energy that had entered the primal aperture between Prince An's brows, greatly increasing his spiritual energy, thus speeding up the activation of his inner energy. Chuli was shocked. He had always been proud of his mental strength. The combination of the souls of 2 lifetimes had allowed his mental strength to far surpass that of an ordinary person. That was how he was able to successfully cultivate the scripture of the origin of wisdom, the omniscient mirror, the scripture of life and death, and the art of white tiger. If he didn't have a strong mind, his aptitude wouldn't even be comparable to an ordinary person's, and it would be impossible for him to achieve what he had today. He suddenly realized that the one and only advantage that he was so proud of was actually possessed by King An as well. Naturally, he felt uncomfortable. He quickly calmed himself down and frowned in deep thought. With the help of the ancient cauldron, why was King An's spiritual energy weaker than his? He suppressed his curiosity and quietly watched the ancient cauldron and King An sitting inside the cauldron. King An's face quickly turned red, as if he was drunk. His face revealed a pained expression. After holding on for an hour, he could no longer hold on and floated out of the ancient cauldron. When he landed beside the ancient cauldron, his injuries were mostly healed. However, Chuli discovered that the strange inner energy had not been destroyed. There was still a remnant of it. It grew rapidly. Through these 2 hours of observation, Chuli had discovered the secret behind it. King An's primal aperture at the center of his brows was like a bottle. His spiritual energy was like a golden thread that floated in wisps, sparse and sparse. After entering the ancient cauldron, the golden threads drilled into the ancestral aperture, increasing the density of the golden threads. The denser the golden threads were, the more headaches they had. It was already a miracle that King An managed to hold on for 2 hours. King An exited the ancient cauldron. The golden threads in the ancestral aperture quickly dispersed and returned to their original density without any other changes. This situation was similar to when he helped Xue Ling with her cultivation. He could increase the speed of his inner energy and the speed of cultivation, but he could not increase his mental strength. The strangest thing was that this ancient cauldron could transform the power of the void into mental power. What was the power of the void? Could he convert it? What was the principle behind it? He activated the omniscient mirror and looked inside and outside the cauldron. The ancient cauldron was made of bronze, but there was a strange aura flowing within the bronze. This aura flowed within the bronze, drawing a strange symbol. This reminded Chuli of the human body. Inner energy flowed in the meridians, and this strange symbol was like the meridians of the ancient cauldron. The force flowed along the symbol, absorbing the energy in the void and transforming it into golden spiritual energy. It was stored in the ancient cauldron like water. This strange symbol was the secret of the ancient cauldron. This cauldron was built in a very mysterious way. If he did not have the omniscient mirror, it would be almost impossible for others to peek at it. When the ancient cauldron was cut open, nothing could be seen because the aura would overflow and the symbols wouldn't be tangible. It was merely constructed by aura. Chuli suddenly disappeared from the spot and appeared in the cultivation room, entering the ancient cauldron. Immediately, threads of spiritual energy drilled into his mind. He visualized the art of white tiger portrait in his mind. The spirit tiger leaped into his mind, and the power of the void surged. In the blink of an eye, it swallowed his body. He could feel his body squeaking from being squeezed. One moment, he was squeezed into minced meat, the next moment, he was filled to the point of bursting. The cycle of being filled and squeezed repeatedly forged his body, and his flesh became stronger. After about 4 hours, Chu Li realized that the sky was about to brighten. He reluctantly disappeared from the ancient cauldron and appeared in the bedroom. He took off his outer shirt and wore a bluish-white undershirt. He sat on the bed and felt the changes in his body. After cultivating for 4 hours, he did not feel tired at all. His spiritual energy did not seem to be consumed at all. This cauldron was really magical. No wonder King An could enter the Grandmaster's boundary at the age of 40. With the help of this cauldron, it was only natural. He stayed for another day. At night, while King An was away, he used the ancient cauldron to cultivate again. The effect of the art of white tiger portrait became stronger, and his body became stronger. The stronger the body, the more solid the foundation. Even if they were all in the innate mastery's boundary, others would not be his match. On the morning of the 3rd day, he left the imperial residence of King An. In these 2 days, he had figured out King An's actual situation, but he still could not find a way to kill him. King An was in big trouble. The strange inner energy in his body was very strange. No matter how he tried to get rid of it, there was nothing he could do. He was a Grandmaster, and his inner energy was unusually pure. It was better than other Grandmasters, so no one could help him. Chu Li let the horse trot on its own, and sat on the horse to study the symbol of the ancient cauldron. He tried to visualize the talisman in his mind, but there was nothing unusual. He originally thought that if he succeeded in visualizing it in his mind, his spiritual energy would be endless like his inner energy, and it would be endless. Unfortunately, there was only disappointment when he visualized it. He always felt that this could be a Taoist talisman? The art of talisman. In the evening, he arrived at a small town, Golden Crow Town. He had nothing on his mind, and he was not in a hurry to return. He leisurely entered the town under the sunset, found the best inn in the town, and asked for a small courtyard. When the lanterns were first lit, he first went to the town to buy some cinnabar, and then went to the best restaurant in the town, Good Abundance Restaurant. He sat by the window on the 3rd floor, and looked down at the passers-by. He occasionally took a sip of wine and ate some dishes to go with it. Some passers-by were in a hurry, some were strolling leisurely, some had nothing to do, and some were happy. There were all kinds of people in the world, and Chu Li was fascinated. Although he left the temple and stepped into the human world, he did not live a normal life. He lived in the imperial residence, and usually stayed in the Gloriesville courtyard to cultivate and study. He rarely went to the Sky Inn, and he did not go to the New Moon brothel. The bustling Chongming town seemed to have nothing to do with him. All of his thoughts were focused on the pursuit of stronger martial arts and greater power. Although he had reached rank 2, he felt that it was still not the time to enjoy it. King An and the Emperor were pressuring him from above, so he could not do as he pleased. Most of the people he saw had martial arts. Even the stalls selling snacks on the streets below had martial art. The prosperity of martial arts in the world could be seen. His gaze focused, and 3 graceful women in lake green gowns floated over from the east. When they arrived in front of the restaurant, they looked up and entered. The 3 women were wearing veils, and their footsteps were light. They walked slowly, and their faces could not be seen, but they were already beautiful, and it made people's imagination run wild. They went up to the 3rd floor, and sat at a table not far from Chu Li. The waiter warmly greeted them, and the woman who ordered the dishes had a mellow and gentle voice. The people upstairs glanced at the 3 women from time to time. They were wearing veils, and they had to take them off when they ate. Everyone wanted to see their real faces and whether they were beauties. Chapter 196. Chu Li saw their real faces. They were indeed beauties. Although they were not as beautiful as Shao Qi and Shao Shi, they were still inferior to Su Ru and Xueling. In the outside world, they were already rare beauties. The waiter was very attentive and served the dishes even faster than the other tables. As a hot-blooded young man, even though he was a waiter, it was hard for him to quench his love for beauty. Among the three beauties, one of them was an innate master. She was about the same age as Xue Ling. Although she looked delicate, her flesh and blood were much finer than the average person's. She must have practiced the art of body refinement, as her strength was much stronger than the average man's. As for the other two women, they had also cultivated body refining techniques and were far superior to ordinary people. However, their cultivation was only at the post-liminary realm, so they were not worth mentioning in his eyes. When the dishes were served, they tilted their heads and gently took off their white veils. The eyes of the people around them lit up, and they stared at them with wide eyes. Those who were reserved would occasionally glance at them, and those who were thick-skinned would stare straight at them. All eyes were attracted to them. Chu looked out of the window with a glass of wine in hand. After all, there were many beauties in the public house. Chen Shui and the others were also beauties. They always faced Xue Ling and Su Ru, and they often faced Shao Qi, so they were very picky. He held the wine cup and took a sip from time to time as he continued to ponder over the strange symbol. He would try it when he got back tonight to see if he could draw the symbol with cinnabar. What was used to draw the symbols in the ancient cauldron? A grandmaster could not do this. Could it be an enlightened master? His mind suddenly moved, and he turned his head to look. Three young men with long sabers on their waists slowly walked up the stairs and stood at the top of the stairs, sizing up everyone. The young man in the lead was full of heroic spirit. He was dressed in green and stood with his hand on his saber. The two youths behind him looked ordinary. One was tall and muscular, and the other was thin. Their eyes were wide open, and their expressions were unfriendly. Their gazes were like knives, and no one dared to look at them directly. The three of them glanced at Chu Li's face and did not stop. Chu Li did not have a shred of inner energy around him. He looked like a scholar who did not know any martial arts. Their gazes finally fell on the faces of the three beauties and stopped. The three women lowered their heads and ate quietly, adhering to the rule of not talking while eating. The handsome young man in the lead snorted and walked to their table with his knife. He asked in a deep voice, "Are you a disciple of Tai Hua Valley?" The three girls looked up at him, then lowered their heads and continued eating, ignoring him. Bang! The tall and strong young man took a step forward and slammed his palm on the table. Crash! The table, the dishes, and the broken pieces fell into a pile, and the juice flowed everywhere. The three women's chopsticks froze in midair. They slowly raised their heads, their eyes blazing with anger. The tall and strong young man widened his eyes and shouted, "My senior brother is talking to you. Didn't you hear him?" Among the three girls, the petite one shouted, "Are you crazy?" The tall, muscular youth scoffed, "Are you Tai Hua Valley disciples? So what if I am, so what if I'm not?" The petite and exquisite beauty shouted, "Who are you? How dare you be so rude and unreasonable?" "Humph." The muscular young man puffed up his chest and said loudly, "We are disciples of Green Hill." He glanced at the petite and exquisite beauty, and then looked at the people around him proudly. "Disciples of Green Hill. Green Hill! They're in the south. Why are they here?" The people around them were in a heated discussion. Green Hill was a first-rate sect. It was a famous sect in the southern martial arts world. The slightly older, oval-faced beauty waved her hand and stopped the petite girl. She said calmly and gently, "So you're disciples of Green Hill. Tai Hua Valley and Green Hill have always minded our own business. What business do you have with us?" "Humph, mind our own business?" The muscular youth questioned. "You killed a disciple of Green Hill. Why do you say that?" The oval-faced beauty frowned slightly. "Did you destroy Solace Hill?" The muscular youth scoffed. The oval-faced beauty nodded slightly. "Solace Hill has committed all kinds of crimes. We are acting on behalf of the heavens to eliminate them." "Humph, he's already dead." You can say whatever you want. The muscular youth scoffed. My junior brother, Deng, was killed by you at Solace Hill. A disciple of Green Hill is at Solace Hill? The oval-faced beauty shook her head. Everyone knows about Solace Hill's reputation. They wanted to snatch us up the mountain. As martial artists, instead of upholding justice, they committed crimes. Their deaths are not to be regretted. You killed someone and you're saying you're in the right. The muscular youth's expression darkened. He turned and said, Senior brother, let's not waste time talking to them. Let's do it. The muscular youth said calmly, Our Green Hill is a righteous sect. We're reasonable. My junior brother, Deng, mistakenly befriended Bandit. He deserves to die. How about this, 3 ladies? Cripple your own cultivation and we'll forget about this. Why? The petite girl was unconvinced. That guy has killed countless innocent people. He should have died a long time ago. What's wrong with us acting on behalf of the heavens? You Green Hill people are being reasonable. What a joke. Green Hill disciples are not for others to kill. The muscular youth said coldly, If you 3 ladies can't do it, I'll do it for you. Then let's fight. The petite girl unsheathed her sword and pointed it at the 3 young men. Come on, cripple us if you can. Let's fight. The muscular youth drew his gleaming long sword and held it in front of him. Come, come, all of you come at me together. Blow the conch. The petite girl shouted and thrust her sword forward. A few sword sparks surrounded the muscular youth. The muscular youth scoffed and closed in with his sword. Ding! The sword and the sword clashed. The petite girl took 2 steps back and frowned at her opponent. The muscular youth laughed proudly. You're no match for me. Watch out. The petite girl thrust her sword forward. The muscular youth swung his sword but missed. He quickly swung his sword diagonally and hit the tip of the sword. The petite girl's sword collided with the blade and immediately thrust forward. Her sword was faster than before. She used her exquisite swordsmanship to leverage her strength. Ding, 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 ding. A series of metal clashing sounds were heard. More than 20 moves were exchanged in the blink of an eye. Ah! The petite girl screamed and her sword flew out of her hand. The muscular youth used his strength to counter her. His sword was as heavy as a mountain. The petite girl had to bear the brunt of the force. Her wrist was sore and she lost her grip on her sword. Ha! The muscular youth swung his sword without hesitation. He wanted to cut her in half. The other girl drew her sword and tried to save her comrade. Ding! A sword suddenly appeared from the side and knocked her sword away. The muscular youth swung his sword and the petite girl retreated quickly. She could not dodge it. She screamed. Her right shoulder and upper arm were exposed. Blood soaked her sleeves. The crowd was shocked. They could not bear to watch. They did not expect the muscular youth to be so cruel. Chu Li shook his head. He did not plan to help. He would not provoke the grudges of the martial arts world if he could. There were endless troubles. Everyone had their own fate. He was not a savior and could not save everyone. Grudges were often messed up and could not be sorted out. Moreover, he showed mercy. Otherwise, her arm would have been separated from her body. The oval-faced girl sealed the petite girl's acupuncture point. She took out some ointment and applied it to stop the bleeding. Then, she fed her a pill. She turned to look at the other 2 who were fighting. She frowned. Her junior sister was no match for them. She could only rely on herself. Chu Li smiled. The girl's cultivation level was the highest among the 6. The 3 disciples from the Green Hill were no match for her. Junior sister Zhang, stand down, she said softly. Yes. The petite girl who was waving her sword left the battlefield. The oval-faced girl unsheathed her sword and said, He Binghua from the Tai Hua Valley. Su Shao from the Green Hill. The handsome youth unsheathed his sword and scoffed, There are no eyes under the blade. Don't blame me for your life or death. Please. He Binghua thrust her sword forward. The tip of the sword whistled as if it was piercing through cloth. Su Shao swung his sword at her head. It was like a flash of lightning. It was extremely fast. He Binghua stepped to the side to avoid the long sword. Her sword continued to thrust forward, forcing Su Shao to retreat. Chi! 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 He Binghua's sword whistled. Su Shao kept retreating. He could not swing his long sword. He Binghua's swordplay was exquisite. Although it looked soft, it was very aggressive. Su Shao's blade was ferocious, but he had no way to use it. He was forced to retreat continuously. He could not catch his breath, and his blood was boiling. His movements became slower and slower. Ding! Suddenly, a sword came from the side. He Binghua pointed her sword and the long sword flew out. Chu Li was helpless. He tilted his head to the left and dodged the rolling long sword. Ding! The long sword pierced deeply into the window frame. The handle trembled. He Binghua stared coldly at the tall, muscular young man who was empty-handed. She glanced sideways at Su Shao. Green hill, what a green hill! Su Shao's face darkened. He stared at the tall and strong youth. Brother Zhao. The tall and strong youth looked embarrassed. He turned and stared at Chu Li. What are you waiting for? Hand me the sword. Chu Li laughed. This was an unexpected disaster. He did not want to bother with it, but it came knocking on his door. He suddenly thought of teasing them. He stood up and pulled out the sword with both hands. He walked forward and handed it to the tall and strong youth. He smiled. What are you smiling at? The tall and strong youth did not take the long sword. He glared and shouted. He helped but was shouted at by his senior. It was really embarrassing. He had nowhere to vent his anger. Seeing Chu Li's smile, it seemed like he was mocking him. He suddenly became angry. Brother Zhao. Su Shao said, Don't be rude. Brother, this guy dares to laugh at me. He really doesn't know what's good for him. The tall and strong youth said angrily, It's only me. If it was someone else, I would have slashed him and his head would have been removed. All right. Su Shao waved his hand and said impatiently, Why bother with someone who doesn't practice martial arts? Brother, I'm not fussing with him. I'm doing this for his own good. The tall and strong youth quickly said, Learn your lesson. Don't lose your life in the future. Chu Li shook his head and handed the long sword forward. The tall and strong youth scoffed and took the long sword. His expression changed. A vast amount of inner energy flowed from the long sword into his body. It was like a raging wave crashing on the shore. His inner energy was completely expelled. Only the other's inner energy flowed in his meridians. He lost control of his body and could not move. Chu Li smiled and retracted his hand. You're welcome. The tall and strong youth looked at him in shock. Chu Li sat back at the table and smiled as he picked up the wineglass. The tall and strong youth widened his eyes and stared at Chu Li's young face. He could not believe it. He felt that he must have been hallucinating. How could he have such an unimaginable cultivation level at such a young age? Chu Li picked up the wineglass and took a sip. Brother Zhao. Su Shao called out. Ah! The tall and strong youth responded loudly. He immediately realized that he had lost his composure. He forced a smile. Let's go, Su Shao said. With a gloomy face, he closed fist saluted and scoffed, Miss He, we'll meet again. Chapter 197. He Binghua looked at them quietly and did not say a word. Although he was better than Su Shao, the other two from Green Hill were better than Sister Zhang and Sister Sunday. It would not be a good fight. Moreover, Green Hill was bigger than Taihua Valley. It was better to take a step back. Su Shao waved his hand and turned to leave. The tall and strong young man looked at Chu Li in surprise, then turned around and followed. Stop! The waiter suddenly stood up and blocked their way. Su Shao frowned at him. The waiter puffed out his chest and said loudly, "My 3 guests, you have not paid for our table and chairs. Bastard, you're asking for it." The young man was furious. Su Shao waved his hand. "Brother Zhao, give it to him." The young man glared at the waiter as if he wanted to eat him alive. The waiter looked at the 3 girls and immediately puffed out his chest and shouted, "20 taels!" The young man gritted his teeth and raised his hand. He took out a silver ingot and threw it. Puff! A silver light flashed and the silver ingot shot into the pillar. The waiter looked at the silver that was deeply embedded in the pillar and gulped. He did not dare to make a sound. If it did not hit the pillar and hit him, he would probably end up like this. He felt a chill down his spine. The young man glanced at the crowd and glared at the waiter. His eyes skipped over Chu Li and did not dare to look at him. "Let's go." Su Shao strode down the stairs and the other 2 hurriedly followed. "Sister, son?" He Binghua retracted her gaze and looked at the injured petite girl. The petite girl's face was pale and she scoffed, "It's just a flesh wound, it's nothing." "Humph, as expected of Green Hill." She then laughed. "Sister He, to be able to defeat Su Shao, you really are Sister He Binghua." He Binghua shook her head. "They are not to be underestimated. Let's go back first." "All right, I'm not in the mood to eat anyway." The 3 of them got up and walked out. Before He Binghua went down the stairs, her clear eyes glanced at Chu Li. She left as if nothing had happened. Chu Li watched the 3 girls go down the stairs and shook his head while holding his wine glass. He had heard of Taihua Valley. It was a second-rate faction with decent strength. The disciples were all female. Unlike the Snow Lunar Pavilion, Taihua Valley did not accept male disciples. It was said that the mental cultivation method of Taihua Valley was only suitable for females to cultivate. If males cultivated it, they would go berserk. Green Hill was also a famous mountain. The first-rate Orthodox faction had a good reputation in the martial arts world, but it was an enemy of the Snow Lunar Pavilion. The 2 sects were old enemies that had been entangled for hundreds of years. The enmity between them grew deeper and deeper, and there was no way to resolve it. The Snow Lunar Pavilion was an Orthodox sect, and so was the Green Hill. They were usually very upright, but of course, it was inevitable that there would be disciples who disdained them. As long as the disciples met, they would fight. There was no distinction between good and evil. This was the grudge of the martial arts world. It had nothing to do with justice and was just a personal grudge. It was difficult for outsiders to interfere. The waiter diligently sent the 3 ladies off, and when he came back, he stepped on a chair to dig out the silver ingots. However, the silver ingot was deeply embedded in the pillar. The pillar was made of hard wood, so he took a kitchen knife and spent a lot of effort to dig it out. He sat on the chair, panting. Everyone burst into laughter. Chu Li shook his head. He loved beauties so much that he would not hesitate to die under a peony. Unfortunately, he met a disciple of the Green Hill. If it was someone else in the martial arts world, he would have suffered a lot. Chu Li shook his head again. He had seen the waiter's thoughts. He went with the intention of suffering. If he suffered, the 3 ladies from Taihua Valley would definitely care about him. To a small character, that was something he could brag about for a lifetime. After Chu Li finished his meal, he took the cinnabar and returned to his courtyard. There were many lanterns hanging in the courtyard, and it was very bright. He took some yellow paper, ground the cinnabar, and started to draw talismans. In a short while, more than 10 talismans were drawn. He looked at his masterpiece and shook his head in disappointment. He rubbed his hands, and the talismans turned into powder that was blown away by the night wind. It was useless. It seemed that this talisman was not a Taoist talisman. He sat in the courtyard and looked at the moon, thinking hard. It seemed that he had to do some research. There must be some records of such a strange technique. As long as he could find some bits and pieces, he might be able to do it. He was not researching this for himself. If Xue Ling and the other ladies had this item to help them with their cultivation, their progress would be very fast. However, he did not need this now. He only lacked the surpassing state. He thought about the future. With the help of this talisman, Xue Ling and Chen Xue's martial arts would improve greatly. Chen Xiu would also become a top-notch master. Then, he would be able to slack off. If there was anything, he could just give an order and it would naturally be done. He did not have to do it himself. Pa! A soft sound was particularly loud in the night sky. Chuli raised his eyebrows and looked at the courtyard on the west side. His neighbor to the west. The sound came from there. He activated the omniscient mirror and suddenly smiled. What a coincidence! There were 3 people living there. They were the 3 ladies from Tai Hua Valley. It was late at night. They had already fallen asleep and immediately woke up when they heard the noise. The 3 ladies came to the courtyard with their swords in hand. Their backs were against each other, and they were all wearing white undergarments. Their faces were as fair as jade, and they looked even more beautiful. The surroundings were quiet, as if they were making a fuss. They held their swords in front of them. Their bright eyes looked around vigilantly, and their bodies were tense. Chi! A long whistling sound rang out. Concealed weapons that blotted out the sky and covered the earth fell down densely, hitting the 3 women like rain. Ding 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 ding. Like rain hitting banana leaves, the sound was crisp and sweet. The 3 ladies waved their swords and formed a light shield, completely covering themselves. The hidden weapons bounced off the light shield, and in the blink of an eye, a layer of them fell on the ground. Which scoundrel are you? Show yourself! The petite Sun Lihua shouted. She held a sword in her left hand, and it was no less powerful than her right hand. Hee! 2 men in black stood on the wall. After 2 cold laughs, they floated in front of the ladies like 2 leaves. Who are you? He Binghua asked calmly. The 2 men in black were tall and thin. Their faces were pale, and under the moonlight, they looked like zombies. Coupled with their shiny eyes, they looked even more like zombies. Hee! The 2 of them sneered, their chilliness penetrating. Sun Lihua's delicate body trembled. She scoffed, playing tricks. Despicable people. 2 scoundrels. The slightly taller man sneered. My surname is Yao, and I live on the Solace Mountain. The Yao family's twin ghosts? He Binghua said calmly. I didn't expect you 2 to slip through the net. How dare you come again? If it wasn't for the fact that we weren't on the mountain, you 3 girls wouldn't have had the chance to succeed. Humph, since you came to us, I'll send you to hell today. Sun Lihua shouted. She knew that they were the Yao family's twin ghosts. They were not ghosts, so she was no longer afraid. He Binghua said, The 2 of you have killed countless people. You should have died long ago. Watch my sword. She shouted softly, and the 3 of them thrust their swords at the same time. Swoosh! The 3 swords formed a sword screen, and with a light whistle, it enveloped the Yao family's twin ghosts. Chuli was surprised. The 3 of them joined forces to increase their power. Each of them had the power of 3 people. It was really amazing. The Yao family's twin ghosts floated backwards at an incredible speed. Not good. He Binghua shouted, Retreat quickly, take the 100 poison pill. She felt her vision swaying, and her body went limp. She had been poisoned. The Yao family's twin ghosts laughed coldly. Ladies, don't worry. We won't kill you. We brothers will enjoy it. You're all still young, hee. They laughed proudly, and let the 3 women take the 100 poison pill. They were very confident in their own poison. Without a unique antidote, any kind of antidote would be useless. The 2 of them watched as the women took the 100 poison pill. Just as they were about to breathe a sigh of relief, they suddenly waved their hands and a wave of hidden weapons shot out. The 3 women's bodies went limp. They wanted to swing their swords, but they had no strength. They could only watch as the hidden weapons flew towards them. The Yao family's twin ghosts' eyes lit up, and they laughed coldly. It was as if they could see the three women's bodies covered with hidden weapons. Suddenly, their bodies heated up, and they were extremely excited. Chapter 198. Chu Li sighed helplessly. He did not want to get involved at first. It would be troublesome to get involved in the grudges of the martial arts world. He couldn't just watch the three beauties die in the hands of these two fellows. He suddenly appeared in front of the three women and drew a circle with his sword. The hidden weapons in the air rushed into the circle and fell to the ground. This was the 10,000 returning arrows, which was specialized in breaking hidden weapons. "Who are you?" The Yao family's twin ghosts stared at Chu Li. They were interrupted at the most exciting moment. If it were not for his light body technique and swordsmanship, they would have torn him apart. Chu Li did not care about the two of them. He took out pills and stuffed them into the three women's mouth. The three women were weak. They supported each other to prevent themselves from collapsing. They could not resist Chu Li's pills. Chu Li patted each of their backs to help the pills dissolve. The three women felt the pills in their mouths turn into a gust of fresh air. It circulated around their organs and instantly refreshed them. Chu Li gave them a look and leaped back. He flipped over the wall and disappeared. He came and went like a bird. The three women understood Chu Li's meaning. They supported each other weakly and stared at the Yao family's twin ghosts angrily. "You poisoned us. How despicable!" The Yao family's twin ghosts looked at the direction where Chu Li disappeared. They did not know what he was doing. He came and went as if he just wanted to give them the antidote. They were very confident in their poison. Without their antidote, no one could cure them. Looking at the three delicate women, they once again revealed a strange smile. The Yao family's big brother scoffed. "Let's just kill them. What a pity." "All right." The two of them leaped into the air. They stretched out their dark green claws and swooped down on the three women like eagles. The three women screamed and retreated in a sorry state. The Yao family's twin ghosts smiled cruelly and excitedly in the air. The thought of inserting his hands into their delicate bodies, the softness was unparalleled. It was better than any taste. It was intoxicating. Ah dash! The three girls widened their eyes and screamed, but they couldn't move. Hee hee. The Yao family's twin ghosts smiled even more. Their claws glowed blue under the moonlight. He grabbed He Binghua's and Sun Lihua's towering breasts. The married couple ghosts suddenly stopped, and a strange cry came from their throat. They looked down at the swords that were inserted into their chests, and stared at the three women in disbelief. The three girls twisted their waists, drew their swords, and retreated. It was neat and tidy. Chi! 3 fountains of blood gushed out. The Yao family's twin ghosts raised their hands with great difficulty. Their black and blue fingers trembled as they pointed at them. Then, they fell to the ground unwillingly. Bang! Bang! The two of them fell down heavily. Motionless. "You deserve it." Sun Lihua giggled as she sheathed her sword with her left hand. "The Yao family's twin ghosts have really become ghosts, ha. She laughed delicately. Thinking of the fear she had felt just now and the current outcome, she felt even happier. He Binghua looked around and gave a fist salute in the direction where Chu Li disappeared. She raised her voice and said, "Thank you for saving me, master." The surroundings were silent. No one answered. "Senior Marshal Sister, isn't that the person we saw in the restaurant?" Sun Lihua asked. He Binghua nodded lightly. She recognized Chu Li but felt strange. She couldn't tell that he knew martial arts at all. The other girl, Zhang Feihua, whispered, "Since this master doesn't want to show himself, then don't force him." "All right, let's go," He Binghua said. "We can't stay here any longer. Let's move out immediately." "All right," Sun Lihua agreed. The three girls took their bags and left, ignoring the Yao family's twin ghosts. As soon as they left, Chu Li appeared, shaking his head. His long sword slashed across and 2 heads rolled down. The Yao family's twin ghosts were proficient in feigning death. The three girls were careless because the Yao family's twin ghosts were ugly. Their bodies were covered in poison, and they avoided them like snakes and scorpions. They didn't check if they were alive or dead. If the Yao family's twin ghosts did not die this time, they might not be able to escape the next ambush. He used his sword to pry open the twin ghosts' clothes, and a few bottles fell from their sleeves. He then picked up the deerskin pouches from their waists and wrapped them in a bag. He was going to bring them back to the public house for the herb courtyard to study. The Yao family's twin ghosts' poison was very strong. There was something special about it that was worth studying. The next morning, he continued his journey. He galloped on his horse, wanting to return to the public house earlier to investigate. He had read all the books in the Wisdom Tower, and there were no records of this skill. However, he knew that there was a library in the public house that was not open to the public. The horse was like a dragon, its speed was extremely fast. The horses on the main road were overtaken by it. After a while, they were out of sight. It galloped happily and Chu Li let it be. At this speed, he would be able to reach Chongming Town by noon the next day. At noon, the sun was blazing. Chu Li let the horse slow down and trotted for a while to let it relax and rest for a while. He went into the forest beside the road and wanted to rest in the post house. When the horse entered the forest, Chu Li was stunned. What a coincidence! In the post house sat three graceful girls with white veils. They were wearing moon-white gowns that were spotless. They were the three girls from Tai Hua Valley. They heard the sound of the horse's hooves and turned to look. They saw Chu Li on the horse. The three girls were stunned and closed-fist saluted. Chu Li sighed in his heart. He closed-fist saluted with a smile and jumped off the horse. He let go of the reins and let the horse graze in the forest while he entered the pagoda. "I have not asked for your name, master." Holly stood up and closed-fist saluted. "Thank you for saving my life last night." Chu Li shook his head and smiled. "Chu Li, it was nothing. You are welcome." Zhang Feihua looked at him and smiled sweetly. "Master Chu Li is young and promising. You must be a disciple of a famous faction?" Chu Li smiled. "A scribe of the E-Public House." "The E-Public House?" The three girls' expression changed slightly and looked at each other. Chu Li predicted their reaction. He smiled and sat on the other side of the pagoda. The martial arts factions and the public house were enemies. The public house's responsibility was to suppress the martial arts factions within their borders and prevent them from breaking the law with their martial arts. This was to help the imperial court to stabilize the world. In the eyes of the martial arts people, the public house was the imperial court's dog. They disdained and hated them. After Chu Li sat down, he did not look at them. He turned to look at the scenery outside the pagoda. His expression was cold and he wanted to keep his distance. Holly calmed herself down and said, "No matter who you are, master, you have saved our lives." Chu Li waved his hand and smiled. "You don't have to be like this. It's better if we don't have anything to do with each other. Last night, I just didn't like those two guys. You don't have to worry about it. Just pretend that nothing happened." Holly shook her head. "Master Chu Li is too humble." Sun Lihua scoffed. "Is Master Chu Li looking down on our faction because it's too small?" Chu Li turned his head and looked at her. He smiled and shook his head. Sun Lihua pouted. "You are obviously looking down on us." Chu Li sighed. "If your master finds out that you befriended the public house, you will be grounded in the valley and never come out again." "Master is not that unreasonable." Sun Lihua scoffed. Chu Li smiled and looked at Holly. Sun Lihua looked at Holly. Holly looked troubled. She pursed her lips and did not speak. "Sister he?" Sun Lihua looked at her in confusion. Holly sighed. "Sister Sun Lihua, Master Chu Li is right. Although the public house is despicable, it's not like there are no good people." Sun Lihua was confused. "The Green Hill is a righteous faction. Don't they have bad people?" Holly said, "I will tell you next time. Master Chu Li, I can't repay you for saving our lives. If you have any request, as long as it doesn't go against the rules of the martial arts world, I will do my best. Chu Li smiled. Don't worry, I won't force you to repay me. Let's pretend we don't know each other. The three girls were a little embarrassed. Sun Lihua looked at Holly in confusion. Holly had no intention of explaining. Chu Li felt bored. If they stayed any longer, they would feel uncomfortable. He stood up and closed fist saluted. Then we shall meet again. Chapter 199. Sister Ho, what's wrong with him? Sunflower turned to look at Holly. We're not spiritual beasts, why is he afraid of us? Holly shook her head. Master Chu is just being kind. What kind of kind? Sigh, we should stay away from the House of High Dukes. Holly shook her head. Sister Sun, after we return to the valley, don't tell Master about this. Why? Sunflower shook Holly with her left hand. Sister Ho, just tell me, don't keep me in suspense. Sigh. Holly sighed. Master's father was killed by the House of High Dukes. Sunflower scoffed. The House of High Dukes can't just kill for no reason, right? Master's father killed a corrupt official. Holly said. Corrupt officials should be killed. Sunflower scoffed. What's wrong with that? Holly's face darkened. Have you forgotten the rules of our Tai Hua Valley? You can't attack the officials of the imperial court. Sunflower pouted. What kind of rule is that? She was very dissatisfied with this rule, bullying the weak and fearing the strong. Just because they were officials, they could do evil and bully the people? But the rules of the valley were rules. If violated, they would be expelled from Tai Hua Valley. She could only obey. Holly said, It doesn't matter if the officials are good or bad, if you kill them, the House of High Dukes will arrest the murderer. Even the Tempest Temple won't kill officials of the imperial court, let alone us. Monks don't kill people. Sunflower said. Holly said, If you dare to kill an official, you won't be able to escape the pursuit of the House of High Dukes. Our valley will also be implicated. Sunflower scoffed. She had nothing to say. Holly said, Think about how Master feels. She can't take revenge, and she has to hide from them. She gets angry when she hears about the House of High Dukes. Don't make her angry. She's really annoying. Sunflower sighed. Zhang Feihua, who had been silent all this while, said, It seems that Master Chu knows about the valley leader's past. Sigh. Holly shook her head and sighed. Not everyone in the House of High Dukes is bad. Master Chu is a good person. Zhang Feihua said. Unfortunately, he's from the public house, Zhang Feihua said. Sun Lihua pouted. He snorted. He Binghua stared at the direction where Chu Li had disappeared and was lost in her thoughts for a while. Then, her guilt turned into a sigh. Let's go, we should hurry on with our journey. Senior Marshal Sister He. The public house is in Chongming Town, right? Yes. Let's go to Chongming Town too. Why don't we catch up with young Master Chu and follow him? Are you trying to piss me off? Zhang Feihua asked. Sun Lihua rolled her eyes. Just don't let Master know. He Binghua said, I don't think Master Chu wants to be too close to us. Let's go our separate ways. Sun Lihua pouted her lips and sulked. The three of them left the post house and galloped away. The weather in September could change at will. Just a moment ago, the sun was shining brightly, scorching and threatening. But now, dark clouds were surging, covering the sky and covering the sun. They sped up, but they still couldn't escape the heavy rain. After a while, it was pouring. They didn't dare to stop in the middle of the road. If it kept raining, they wouldn't be able to walk. They could only rush forward in the wind and rain. Even though they had martial arts, they were still physically and mentally exhausted. After walking for half a day, they finally saw a small town or desolate town. They hurriedly entered the town. They found a tavern and changed their clothes and dried their hair. When they came out, the lanterns were already lit. It was still raining outside. They came to the hall of the tavern, and wanted to make do with a meal. The food in the tavern was not as good as the ones in the restaurants, but it was enough to fill their stomach. As soon as the three of them stepped into the hall, they were immediately attracted to them. They were used to it. Their bright eyes glanced around and suddenly, they saw Chu Li sitting in the corner. Sun Lihua pulled He Binghua and Zhang Feihua and walked towards Chu Li's table with light step. She smiled sweetly and said, "Young Master Chu, can we sit?" Chu Li looked around. Almost all the tables around him were filled with people. Only his table was empty. He had a sword on his waist. He was dressed in a brocade robe. The jade on his waist was as warm as water. Coupled with his dignified bearing, most of the guests who came and went avoided him. "Young Master Chu." Sun Lihua saw his hesitation and called out in dissatisfaction. Chu Li smiled and nodded, "Please sit." Binghua smiled, "Sorry to disturb you." "Young Master Chu Li." Chu Li also smiled, "I didn't expect to see you again. Let's pay for this meal." Binghua said, "This is a small token of our appreciation." Chu Li happily nodded and agreed. After a while, the table was filled with 8 delicious dishes. He had already ordered them. They were the most expensive dishes in the tavern. He was rich and would not treat his mouth unfairly. He picked the best dishes. The 3 girls ordered a few more expensive dishes. Taihua Valley did not have to worry about food and clothing. "Young Master Chu, we are also going to Chongming Town." Sun Lihua poured a glass of wine for Chu Li and said with a smile, "We are going the same way." "Sister Sun." Binghua frowned. Sun Lihua did not care. "Since we are going the same way, isn't it better to go together?" Chu Li smiled. Binghua said, "Young Master Chu, my master is in Chongming Town. We are going to meet up there. If you don't mind, we can go together." Chu Li said, "This, if your master finds out, you will be punished." Binghua said, "If my master knows that you saved us, he will not blame us. To be able to travel with the 3 of you is a blessing from my past life." Chu Li smiled, "Unfortunately, I have some matters to attend to in town. I don't know how long it will take." "Then we will wait for you," Sun Lihua said. "Sister Sun." Binghua glanced at her and turned her head. "We can't let master wait for too long. We have to hurry. I'm really sorry." She could tell that Chu Li did not want to be too close to the 3 of them. He was trying to avoid arousing suspicion. Although she was not happy, she did not force him. Chu Li smiled and nodded. Sun Lihua stared at Chu Li with dissatisfaction and lowered her head to eat. Chu Li only smiled and did not say anything. It was better not to be too close to the people from Taihua Valley. What if the disciples of Taihua Valley committed a crime in the future, and he wanted to kill them? Being close to them would be asking for trouble. The best way was to keep a distance. The rain came and went quickly. It cleared up in the middle of the night and a strong wind blew the ground dry. They could walk in the morning. Binghua and the other 2 girls left after breakfast. They sped along the way. After running for more than 20 miles, they suddenly heard the sound of galloping horses. In the blink of an eye, they had overtaken them and stopped. They were lined up in a row, blocking the road. Binghua and the other 2 girls' faces changed. There were 4 horses in front of them, all disciples of Green Hill. Other than Su Shishao and the other 2, there was also a man in his 30s. He had a long and narrow face and a long and narrow knife at his waist. It was a strange style. "Su Shishao, why are you here again?" Sun Lihua scoffed, "Move." Su Shishao said lightly, "This is my 3rd brother, He Xinting. He is here to ask for advice from Miss He." "How shameless! You lost and you came to find your brother." Sun Lihua pouted. Binghua's beautiful face was serious as she stared at He Xinting. He Xinting glanced at the 3 girls lazily and said, "You can come at me together. I don't want people to say that I am bullying the weak. You have lost. I won't kill you, I will only destroy your martial arts." His voice was dry and hoarse as if he had been burned by charcoal soup. He did not wait for the three girls to speak and leaped from the back of his horse. The long knife at his waist turned into a ray of light and slashed towards Bing Hua. The three girls drew their swords and waved them. Instantly, the sword light exploded and blocked He Xinting's long knife. He Xinting frowned. He thought that it would be a piece of cake. He did not expect the three of them to be so powerful. Tai Hua Valley's combined attack technique lived up to its name. Ding, 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 ding. The four of them attacked continuously with their sword. He Xinting used the momentum of the sword to step back and returned to his horse. Good, no wonder Su Shishao lost. Not bad, let's go. He pulled the reins and turned his horse around. Su Shishao and the other two quickly followed. Running away when you can't win. Green Hill. Sun Lihua pouted. She smiled and said, Senior sister Green Hill is only SOSO. Bing Hua shook her head and frowned as she watched the four of them leave. They ran for another 10 miles and another 5 people blocked their way. Other than Su Shishao and the other 3, there was a skinny young man who was about the same age as He Xinting. His face was delicate and his eyes were dark. He gave off a vicious vibe. Sun Lihua asked angrily, Su, do you people from Green Hill have no shame? You beat one after another. Are you going to ask your faction leader to come out in the end? This is senior brother Feng Xiaohua. Feng Xiaohua. Su Shishao pointed at the delicate young man beside him and said in a low voice, If you can defeat senior brother Feng, then we will forget about all the grudges between us. Fine, you said it. Sun Lihua scoffed. Hurry up and do it, Xiaohua. Gather? Arrogant? Lower Wu. The three of them pulled out their swords and leaped towards Feng Xiaohua. Feng Xiaohua sat firmly on his horse and waited for the 3 swords to reach him. The long knife on his waist turned into a silver ray and swept towards their throats. The 3 of them retreated and landed back on their horses. Feng Xiaohua flew up. His blade aura was like a waterfall, falling towards He Bing Hua. The 3 of them swung their swords again. Ding! The swords of the 3 women flew out of their hands. Feng Xiaohua's cultivation level was far higher than the 3 of them. Even if the 3 of them worked together, they would not be able to defeat him. Their hands were empty as they watched Feng Xiaohua's long knife close to their throat. He was obviously going to kill them. He did not just want to cripple their martial arts. With this knife, their heads would be separated from their bodies. Ding! Sun Lihua had just closed her eyes when she heard a clear sound. She quickly opened her eyes and saw Feng Xiaohua sitting on his horse with a gloomy face. His hands were empty. Following their gaze, she saw the long knife stuck in a tree 10 meters away, the handle trembling. Who are you? Please show yourself. Feng Xiaohua shouted coldly. There was no sound except for the sound of the wind. Feng Xiaohua said coldly, Green Hill is here. If we have disturbed you in any way, please forgive us. There was still only the sound of the wind. Feng Xiaohua's gloomy eyes fell on the 3 women. He laughed coldly and flew 10 meters away like a hawk. He pulled out his long knife and landed on his horse's back. He lifted the reins and turned to leave. The crowd quickly followed and in the blink of an eye, they were out of sight. Bing Hua closed fist saluted and raised her voice. Is it Master Chu? There was no movement. Bing Hua sighed and raised her voice. Thank you, Master Chu. I will repay you in the future. The 3 women then continued on their way. Chu Li appeared from the forest and looked at the disappearing silhouettes of the 3 women. He shook his head and laughed. He had saved their lives again. It seemed that they were fated to be in Tai Hua Valley. Chapter 200. At noon, Chu Li returned to the public house. He returned to the Sky Soul Institute. As soon as he breathed in the scent of the Glories Will tree, the exhaustion in his body dissipated and he immediately relaxed. After entering the house and changing his clothes, Xueling knocked on the door and brought in a basin of warm water for him to wash his face. After he finished wiping his face, he sat on the armchair in the living room. She served him tea and stood to the side, staring at him with her beautiful eyes. Chu Li sat down and looked at his clothes. "What's wrong?" "Master, you've lost weight," Schweling said. Chu Li could not help but laugh. "You've lost weight in just a few days? But it's true, the food in the mansion and the restaurant are not as good as the food you make, it's not to my taste." Schweling immediately beamed with joy. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Xue floated out of the living room and opened the door. Su Ru was standing outside. Su Ru was dressed in an apricot gown that fluttered in the wind. Her pretty face was bright and flawless. "Chu Li is back, right? I just entered the house." Xue smiled. "Then hurry up. Lady Xiao, please invite him over," Su Ru said. Schweling said, "Why are you so impatient? You talk too much." Su Ru rolled her eyes. Schweling pursed her lips and smiled. By the time they entered the living room, Chu Li had already stood up. "Chief, let's go. You can go by yourself. I'll bring Schweling to your island." Su Ru smiled. Chu Li smiled and nodded. He walked out of the courtyard and arrived at the Tower of Stargazing. They were still far away from the stargazing tower, but they could already hear the sound of the zither. The sound of the zither revealed the high sky and bright air, with a broad artistic conception. Chu Li smiled. The lady was in a good mood today. He went straight to the third floor, and was startled to see that the second miss was also there. Xiao Qi brandished her sword. The light from her sword was as clear as water, graceful and elegant. Xiao Shi's back was facing her as she sat in front of the window, playing the guqin. The sunlight shone through the window, making Xiao Shi's face look like white jade. From the side, the contours of her face were deep. It was breathtakingly beautiful. "Young lady, second lady." Chu Li fist saluted. The sword light suddenly disappeared, and the treasured sword returned to its sheath. The sound of the zither stopped abruptly. The two ladies lifted their eyes and looked at him. 2 rays of clear light landed on his face. "Have a seat." Xiao Qi pointed at the garden stool. Chu Li's expression did not change as he calmly sat opposite the 2 women. He felt that the entire third floor was brightly lit, and the 2 women's faces overlapped, making it hard for him to look at them directly. "Thank you for making this trip. What did King An say?" "He said he would send a few more people to teach second Miss Palace etiquette and take care of second Miss Daily Life." Xiao Qi said, "Yes, I have to learn. Otherwise, I'll become a laughing stock in the imperial residence and lose face as a princess." "What do you mean by decent?" Xiao Shi smiled faintly. Xiao Qi glared at her and continued to ask, "Chu Li, what do you think of King An?" Just like her, Chu Li could see through people's hearts. Just by meeting them once, he could tell what they were thinking. And personality. Chu Li smiled. "King An's health isn't very good. He's sick." Xiao Qi frowned. "I've never heard of it." She stared at Chu Li thoughtfully. Chu Li was avoiding the topic. Could it be that there was something wrong with King An? She glanced at Xiao Shi, who was beside her, and decided to ask her in detail after second sister had left. Xiao Shi asked, "What illness?" Chu Li shook his head. "It's an internal injury, a very troublesome internal injury. The imperial family has countless elixirs and top-notch masters. If it really doesn't work, there's still the emperor." Xiao Qi smiled. "It's just an internal injury, what's there to worry about?" Chu Li smiled. "That's how it should be. I'm sure it won't take too long." Xiao Shi asked, "You've never seen his concubine?" Chu Li shook his head. "I only met King An. After all, my status is different." "That's true," Xiao Shi nodded lightly. Chu Li smiled. "Don't worry, second lady. When you enter the Fu, you will be the main consort. No matter how powerful the side consort is, it will not be proper." "Is King An's daughter all right?" Xiao Shi asked. Chu Li shook his head. Xiao Qi said, "Second elder sister, don't worry. They are not flood spirit beasts. Seo Shi sighed softly. I thought I wasn't even afraid of death. What else could I be afraid of? Now I know I'm just a coward. With Chuli around, you don't have to worry about anything. He'll take care of everything for you. Shao Qi smiled. Seo Shi sighed. Chuli shouldn't have followed me into that quagmire. Chuli smiled. All right, second elder sister. You should go back first. I have something to say to Chuli, Seo Qi said. Seo Shi rolled her eyes. What secret do you have to say behind my back? Shao Qi smiled. It's the messy things in the fu that will pollute your ears. All right. Seo Shi pursed her lips and smiled at Chuli. She raised her eyebrows. Chuli shook his head and smiled bitterly. When Seo Shi gracefully went downstairs, Seo Qi's face darkened. What's wrong with King An? Chuli pondered for a moment. There are a total of 15 grandmasters in the imperial residence of King An, he hesitated. Should he hide it from Seo Qi and let her go to Snow Lunar Pavilion without worry, or should he reveal some information to her? Initially, he planned to hide it from her. He planned to do it quietly without anyone knowing. This was a huge matter that involved the extermination of an entire clan. One more person knowing would increase the risk. Later on, he decided to reveal some information. One man's wisdom was not as good as two. It was inevitable that he would make mistakes if he thought of a plan alone. He needed someone to make up for the mistakes. After all, this was not a trivial matter. If something happened to him, the High Duke's public house would also be implicated. Moreover, it was also his selfishness. If she entered Snow Lunar Pavilion, she would definitely be shot to death. He did not know when they would meet again. She cultivated a strange heart technique that cut off her emotions and desires. After a long time, his image in her heart would be erased, and she would no longer have any worries. There were male disciples in Snow Lunar Pavilion too. Although she did not fall in love at first sight, they would still develop feelings over time. With this matter, he could come into contact with her from time to time. He would have the opportunity to brand himself in her heart and never be erased. These complicated thoughts only flashed through his mind for a moment. He said lightly, King An's strength is shocking. Seo Qi was deep in thought. She stood up and walked to the window. The white veil on the window fluttered like mist and smoke. She looked at the lake in the distance. Her bright eyes were shining. Chuli did not say anything else. With Seo Qi's intelligence, this sentence was enough. As a prince, he has such strength. Seo Qi said slowly, it seems that he has the ambition to fight for the throne. Chuli nodded slowly. Seo Qi turned to look at him. If he has the ambition to fight for the throne, why would he marry second eldest sister? Chuli remained silent. Anyone who understood the affairs of the Ji dynasty knew that the imperial family was afraid of the 12 High Dukes' public houses. The emperor would never allow any of the High Dukes' public houses to become a relative. Otherwise, it would be difficult to suppress them and the dynasty might change. Back then, the emperor had a verbal engagement with the public house to cut off the possibility of King An inheriting the throne. Therefore, all these years, King An had been immersed in poetry and books. He had edited the library and gained a great reputation. He was deeply supported by the upright people in the court, but he consciously did not make friends with the ministers in the military. His foundation was shallow. In the eyes of others, he knew his place and did not go against the emperor's will. If King An was content to be a king of peace and happiness, he would be neutral and not afraid of assassination. Why would he need to win over so many grandmasters? Seo Qi's face was gloomy. She sat down again and leaned forward. She was very close to Chuli and said, Chuli, tell me the truth. Does King An want to kill second eldest sister? Chuli nodded lightly. The vitality-sealing finger of the second lady was done by him. Bang! Seo Qi slammed her palm down. The clear palm print seemed to be branded on the sandalwood tea table. Her face was solemn. King An, Chapter 201. Shao Qi gritted her teeth and looked at Chu Li with a frown. Since he's aiming for the throne, he'll never marry second eldest sister. However, the emperor has personally agreed to the marriage. It's not something that he can cancel just because he wants to. The best way is to kill second eldest sister, right? Chu Li sighed and nodded. Shao Qi asked, "Does he have the intention to kill second eldest sister?" Chu Li did not say anything. Shao Qi gritted her teeth and scoffed. It seems that the Ren public house is colluding with him. Since king and has ambitions for the throne, he will do everything possible to destroy the marriage. Although the accident of the messenger could not change the overall situation, it could be useful at a critical moment. Although Shao Qi was not good at strategy, her insight was amazing. She figured it out in the blink of an eye. What a great king! He'll kick away anyone who stands in his way, right? Shao Qi said. Chu Li said, King Un is indeed ambitious. It seems that second eldest sister can't enter the imperial residence. Shao Qi shook her head. If it doesn't work, we can only fake our deaths to escape. Chu Li shook his head. What if the emperor wants second lady to marry him? The emperor? Shao Qi frowned. She ignored the emperor's thoughts. Chu Li said, if the emperor wants second lady to marry him, will fake her death work? I have already used this trick in the past. Shao Qi did not say anything. Chu Li said, my lady, there is actually another way. What way? Shao Qi looked up at him. Chu Li slowly spat out 4 words. Kill King An. Shao Qi's eyes narrowed. She frowned and looked at him, her eyes flashing. Her expression was calm and nothing strange could be seen, but her emotions were turbulent. Chu Li looked at her quietly, waiting for her to say something. This decision was a bit shocking. Chu Li's mentality was still in the modern era. He feared power, not the Son of Heaven, so he could think of this. For the people of this world, it was difficult to think in this direction. After a while, Chu Li continued, just because he used vitality sealing finger on second lady, he deserves to die, even if he is king An. Moreover, until now, if second lady is not dead, he will not be at ease. Even if he fakes his death, he will find a way to make second lady really dead. Sigh. Shao Qi sighed. Chu Li said, the path to the throne is dangerous and dangerous. He could not tolerate a fatal weakness. Even if he let go of the second miss, could he let the other princes go? Miss, we can't just blindly defend ourselves. We can only take drastic measures. It's not that easy to kill King An. Shao Qi said impatiently. If the emperor finds out, we won't be able to live. If the news of killing King An was leaked, the emperor would not be able to remove the public house, but he could send people to assassinate Xiao Taiying, Xiao Qi, and Xiao Shi. With the imperial family's power, they would definitely be able to exterminate them. That's why we have to do this secretly, Chu Li said, before King An reveals his ambition. Kill him. Otherwise, once his ambitions are revealed, others might be able to guess that we were the ones who did it. You really have guts. Shao Qi rolled her eyes at him. Chu Li spread his hand. We were forced to do this. If Prince An had given the second lady a chance to live, we wouldn't have had to take the risk. Don't tell Big Brother about this, Shao Qi said sternly. He's too straightforward, he'll give himself away. Chu Li nodded. He sighed to himself. The eldest master was upright. To be honest, he was not very suitable to be a high duke. The decline of the public house all these years had something to do with him. After all, he did not have High Duke Shao to teach him. He was not the essence of a superior. Although he knew that people's hearts were evil, he still maintained his integrity. He was open and aboveboard. He disdained scheming tricks and believed that strength could defeat 10. Such a High Duke was not a good High Duke, but he was a High Duke worthy of loyalty. These years, the public house had declined, but it did not fall apart. This was also the reason why everyone in the public house supported him. If he knew about King An's conspiracy, once he saw King An, he would inevitably show hostility. This would make King An suspicious and vigilant, which would make things worse. Xiao Qi turned to look at the vast lake and sighed softly. People really had no choice in this world. The world forced them, and they had no choice. Killing King An was too dangerous. If they were not careful, they would fall into the abyss. She was decisive and quickly cheered up. Do you have any ideas? Chu Li said. I can't think of a good idea. He's a grandmaster, so he can't poison me. I can only use my martial arts, but I'm not a grandmaster yet. A grandmaster? Xiao Qi frowned. Chu Li's light body technique was elusive. He was best at assassination, but he was not a grandmaster, so it would be difficult for him to kill King An. It was almost impossible for a grandmaster to assassinate a grandmaster. Once there was danger, there would be a warning. Unless there was a stronger martial art, he could easily kill King An. As far as she knew, the imperial family's martial arts were amazing. The prince's martial arts were amazing, and they were the best in the grandmaster's boundary. Zhao Qingshan could not defeat King An. Chu Li said, What heart technique did King An cultivate? It should be the scripture of duality. The scripture of duality. Chu Li frowned. All the books in his mind did not record this, not even a word about it. It's a supreme antique study taught through enlightenment. Xiao Qi shook her head. It said that when the great Ji dynasty's ancestor was young, he had a fortuitous encounter and saved a spirit beast. The spirit beast taught him the scripture of duality, and that's how he conquered the country. Is this legend true? Chu Li smiled. It's very likely, Xiao Qi said. If the scripture of duality did not come from a spirit beast, it wouldn't be so amazing. When the great Ji dynasty was young, he was not famous, but after a few years, he became famous. Speaking of which, Chu Li, you have some of the great Ji dynasty's glory. Chu Li quickly waved his hand. Don't say that. Xiao Qi knew that it was inappropriate, so she said, The scripture of duality is very powerful, or else it would be impossible to cultivate to the enlightened mastery's boundary. Chu Li pondered. My lady, do you know about the Taoist talisman? Technique? Green Deer Cliff's talisman? Technique. Xiao Qi said, Talisman? It's the Green Deer Cliff's unique inheritance. Through their unique heart technique, and with the help of cinnabar, they can make some talismans with special effects. However, it's only a small path, it's not elegant. Talisman? Isn't there anything powerful? Chu Li said, For example, something that can help with cultivation? Soul calming talisman, or something like that can help with cultivation. Xiao Qi said disapprovingly, but this is indeed a small path. Think about it, when you make a talisman, you need to calm your mind, and you need God's help. You can only draw it with a flash of inspiration. Even if you draw it for 10 days or half a month, you might not succeed. When you use it, it can only last for a cup of tea. What's the use of it? Chu Li was deep in thought. Outsiders think that it's mysterious and powerful. Ant is a disciple of Green Deer Cliff, so I know the inside story. In fact, talismans are used to scare people. Besides, talismans can only be used by disciples of Green Deer Cliff, and they need the Green Deer Cliff's unique heart technique to activate it. There are fewer and fewer people in Green Deer Cliff who learn this, and it's almost extinct. Is there a talisman that can exist forever and never dissipate? I don't think so. Xiao Qi thought about it and shook her head. Unless it's using spirit beast blood, otherwise, talismans? There's something that dissipates quickly. Spirit beast blood. Chu Li suddenly realized. Xiao Qi stared at him. Chu Li, have you seen such a long-lasting talisman? I've seen it in King An's imperial residence. Chu Li smiled. An ancient cauldron that can help with cultivation. I've always been curious as to how it could have such a magical effect. So it's made from spirit beast blood. You're probably talking about the 9-dragon cauldron. Xiao Qi said, Every imperial residence has one. It can really speed up cultivation. Everyone knows about it? The imperial family and the High Duke's public house know about it. Shao-Chi said, "Don't even think about it. It's related to the scripture of duality. The Emperor can sense its location, so no one can steal it." Chu Li was stunned, and his expression changed slightly. "What's wrong?" Shao-Chi asked. Chu Li said, "My lady, what unique abilities does an enlightened master have? King An was killed, but can the Emperor sense who the murderer is?" Shao-Chi's expression changed too. Chapter 202. Shao-Chi stood up and stood at the window, staring at the clear lake. Every time she looked at the vast lake, her heart seemed to merge with the lake. She suddenly calmed down and her mind became exceptionally agile. Enlightened masters had always been high above. Mortals viewed them as clouds, they were unreachable. Even grandmasters could only look up to an enlightened master. The enlightened master's boundary was too difficult. In the Great Ji dynasty, with a population of 10 billion, only one person entered the enlightened master's boundary. Enlightened masters were mysterious and powerful, as if they did not belong to this world. If enlightened masters did not say anything, how would others know what kind of strange abilities they had? The 9 Dragons tripod cauldron was just a legend. No one knew if it was true or not. It was better to believe it. Until now, no one dared to steal the cauldron. More importantly, there were only a few dozen people who knew about the existence of the 9 Dragons tripod cauldron. Chu Li stared at Shao-Chi to see her decision. After a while, Shao-Chi turned her head. Her eyes were clear and threatening. "King An must be killed." Chu Li smiled. Shao-Chi said, "But King An is not that easy to kill. We only have half a year." Chu Li smiled. "If it doesn't work, we can only kidnap the second lady." Shao-Chi pursed her lips and smiled. Her heavy heart suddenly lightened. Chu Li had endless ideas and was bold enough to do things that ordinary people could not do. This was a great idea. If they really could not kill King An, they could send someone to pretend to be an assassin and kidnap the second sister. They could hide her in a secret place and delay for a while. "If there's no chance, we'll take this step." Shao-Chi smiled. "So don't rush. It's easy to make mistakes if you rush. This concerns the safety of our public house. We can't make any mistakes. Once I become a grandmaster, I can kill him." Chu Li said, "My lady, we can't talk about King An anymore in case the walls have ears. Let's just call him Old Quan." "Old Quan?" Shao-Chi blinked and laughed. "What kind of strange name is that?" Chu Li smiled. "It's because it's strange that others can't think of it." He thought of the word safety. King An reminded him of Old Quan. Coincidentally, his name was similar to Lin Quan. Shao-Chi smiled and rolled her eyes. "All right, Old Quan it is." Shao-Chi smiled and rolled her eyes. "All right, Old Quan it is. When the people from the imperial residence of King An arrive, the second lady must be accompanied by a grandmaster," Chu Li said, "to prevent them from attacking." "Yes, I will think of a way." Shao-Chi sighed. "With Elder Guo around, we won't have to worry about them poisoning us. I'll ask second eldest sister to pretend to be sick more often and have less contact with them." Chu Li exclaimed in admiration. This was a good idea. After he finished speaking, he suppressed his reluctance and stood up to leave. He slowly walked out of the stargazing tower. The faint fragrance from Shao-Chi's body lingered in his nose, and he felt melancholy. The night was dark and the moon was high in the sky. Clear light shone down, illuminating the Chu residence. The martial arts field in the backyard of the Chu clan was brightly lit as if it was daytime. Chu Li sat by the stone table in the backyard, sipping tea as he leisurely watched the women cultivate. More than 40 of them gathered together, and it was very lively. Some of them practiced boxing, while others practiced swordsmanship. None of them had the characteristics of martial arts practitioners. They were still delicate and weak, as if a gust of wind could blow them away. Their physiques had undergone earth-shattering changes. Even the weakest Meng Yen had 3 times the strength of a normal strong man. It was amazing. Chu Li had used the 9 transformation meridian reforming technique and the sun cultivating white tiger portrait. In a short period of time they had been reborn. Even if they did not cultivate the heart technique of inner force, the power of their martial arts purely based on their bodies was still extremely shocking. He smiled and nodded as he watched the women cultivate. As the night grew darker, Zhao Ying and Chen Ying finally returned. They were already familiar with the work in the Leisure Cloud pub. They did not need too many people. 10 people were enough every night. The rest of them would rest, taking turns every 5 days. Only Zhao Ying was the busiest. She had to go to the Leisure Cloud pub every night. When she saw Chu Li, Zhao Ying suddenly smiled like a flower. She wore a light green gown, looking pure and beautiful. Her youthful aura was overwhelming. "Brother, when did you come back?" Zhao Ying went forward and sat opposite him. Chu Li smiled. "Is there anything going on in the pub this afternoon?" "Everyone knows it's the public house. No one dares to mess around." Zhao Ying chuckled. "Especially after the incident with the Phoenix Tree faction, no one dares to cause trouble." The Phoenix Tree faction caused trouble in the Leisure Cloud pub and was quickly destroyed. Once the news was spread, everyone became vigilant and remembered that the Leisure Cloud pub was not to be messed with. Chen Ying came over with a pot of wine and a white jade cup. Empress Su filled the cup. "Master, someone came to me today. She wants me to be her disciple." She was wearing a light purple gown, which made her face look even fairer. Her eyes were overflowing with color under the light, making her look dreamy. "Which faction?" "Tai Hua Valley." Chu Li smiled. "What a coincidence. Master knows someone from Tai Hua Valley." Chen Ying asked with a sweet smile. Zhao Ying said, "It's the leader of Tai Hua Valley who personally told Chen Ying that he wants to take her as his disciple." Chen Ying held the white jade cup with both hands and handed it to Chu Li. Her hands and the white jade cup reflected each other as if they were one. Chu Li took the white jade cup and took a sip. He looked at her beautiful face. "What do you think?" "I'll listen to Master," Chen Ying said. Chu Li put down the white jade cup. "Then don't agree." "Why?" Zhao Ying said, "This is the leader of Tai Hua Valley. She's famous. Leader Mei said that Sister Chen's aptitude is most suitable for Tai Hua Valley's martial arts. She will definitely surpass her master." Chu Li said, "Does Leader Mei know Chen Ying's identity?" The leader of Tai Hua Valley, Mei Ao Shuang, was a grandmaster. She was a genius in martial arts. It was no wonder that Zhao Ying was anxious for Chen Ying. There were about 300 grandmasters in the Great Ji dynasty. The 12 public houses had more than 100. The 4 super sects probably had more than 100. The rest were in the imperial court and some were in the martial arts world. In the martial arts world, grandmasters could become the leaders and elders of the top first-rate sections. Tai Hua Valley was only a second-rate sect, but the leader, Mei Ao Shuang, was a grandmaster. Zhao Ying said, "Everyone knows about the backer of our Leisure Cloud pub. I'm sure Valley Master Mei knows about it too." "Zhao Ying, are you clear about the relationship between the High Duke's public house and the martial arts factions?" "But Sister Chen isn't a member of the House of High Dukes," Zhao Ying said. "Besides, Valley Leader Mei doesn't mind." "She doesn't mind, but I do." Chu Li sighed. "Sister Zhao Ying, don't be so naive. Think more about everything. If in the future, a disciple of Tai Hua Valley commits a crime and I want to hunt them down, what will happen to Chen Ying?" Zhao Ying said, "Tai Hua Valley is full of women. What crime could they commit? Women are much fiercer than men when they get angry." Chu Li waved his hand and said, "Moreover, once you enter the martial arts world, it's like falling into a swamp. You'll never be able to shake off the grudges and grudges. It's dangerous and unpredictable." No, I don't agree. According to his speculations, the feud between Tai Hua Valley and Green Hill was not over yet. Who knows, a fight might break out. If Chen Ying joined Tai Hua Valley, he would not be able to take care of her. What if something happened to her? It would not be like now, sheltered in Chongming town, safe from disaster, peaceful and happy. Zhao Ying wanted to say more, but Chen Ying quickly said, "Okay, I'll listen to Master." Chu Li looked at her and used the omniscient mirror to look into her heart. Chen Ying was moved. She wanted to join Tai Hua Valley and become a master. She would no longer be a burden to him. But since he was so adamantly against it, she could only listen. Chu Li was touched and became even more determined. The martial arts world was too dangerous. It was better for her not to join. Zhao Ying sighed and held Chen Ying's hand. She comforted her. "Sister Chen, you met such an unreasonable person. There's nothing you can do." Chen Ying laughed softly. "Master will not harm me. I'll listen to Master." "I'll go meet Valley Leader Mei tomorrow," Chu Li said. "Brother, Valley Leader Mei has good intentions," Zhao Ying quickly said. "I know what I'm doing." Chu Li picked up the white jade cup and drank it in one gulp. Chapter 203. The next morning, after breakfast, Shui handed Chu Li 2 snow chickens. He carried it to the east garden. Li Yu happily stewed the snow chicken, and the two of them chatted together. Chu Li was still the caretaker of the east garden, so he would occasionally come back to visit. At noon, he and Li Yu sat in the gazebo in the garden, drinking chicken soup, chewing on chicken, drinking wine, chatting and laughing. By the time they finished eating, it was already late afternoon. The two of them went to the garden to work for a while, and it was already evening. Chu Li left the east garden and arrived at the Leisure Cloud Pub. Leisure Cloud Pub was already bustling with noise and excitement. He lifted the curtain and entered. He saw Qin Shui and Meng Yan standing side by side, like two beautiful flowers. The two girls widened their eyes and were about to step forward. Chu Li immediately waved his hand, gesturing for them to keep quiet and find a seat. Chen Shui pursed her lips into a smile and did not step forward. He walked into the main hall. The other half of the hall was already full, leaving only the seats in the main hall. As soon as he sat down at an empty table, a tender voice called out, "Young Master Chu." Chu Li raised his head. Not far from him stood a graceful beauty, dressed in a bluish-white gown. She was stunning. It was He Binghua. Chu Li smiled and waved his hand. He Binghua walked over gracefully and smiled. "Young Master Chu, what a coincidence!" Chu Li smiled. "It's quite a coincidence. Have you found your master?" He Binghua smiled sweetly and said, "My master is over there. Why don't you join us?" Chu Li asked, "Valley Leader is here too?" If the Tai Hua Valley's Valley Master was also there, it would be awkward if they met. It would be better not to. "Yes, the Valley Master is here too." He Binghua smiled and said, "It's all right, the Valley Master also wants to see the young master. Follow me." "I'll be troubling you then," Chu Li said. He Binghua gracefully arrived at a private room. There were 4 people seated around a round table that was surrounded by 3 folding screens. When they saw He Binghua, Sun Lihua and Zhang Feihua stood up and stared at her with wide eyes. "Young Master Chu?" Chu Li gave a fist salute and smiled. Other than Sun Lihua and Zhang Feihua, there were 4 people sitting at the table. There was also a middle-aged woman and a young beauty. The middle-aged woman still retained her charm. She smiled sweetly and was as beautiful as a peach. The young women were even more beautiful, but as cold as ice. She kept people at arm's length. He Binghua smiled and said, "Valley Master, Master, I met young Master Chu." Then, she introduced them to everyone and sat down to talk. The middle-aged woman was Tai Hua Valley's elder, Qin Xiaofeng. The young woman was Tai Hua Valley's valley leader, Mei Aoshuang. Qin Xiaofeng was graceful and charming. She smiled sweetly and said, "Young Master Chu, thank you so much for saving my 3 disciples twice. I have nothing to repay you with, so let me first offer you a toast." After saying that, she picked up the silver cup and drained it in one gulp. "You're too kind, Senior Qin." Chu Li finished his drink in one gulp. Qin Xiaofeng put down her silver cup and said with a smile, "This time I went out with the Valley Master to meet a friend. The 3 of them did not want an old woman like me to go with them, so they took a different route. In the end, they were young and impulsive, and actually destroyed the Ping Zhe mountain. They offended Green Hill." Chu Li nodded. "It's true that Solace Hill has a bad reputation, but I didn't expect it to be this bad. Speaking of which, this was the result of the government's incompetence and inaction. The Great Ji dynasty had been established for hundreds of years, and the officials were no longer honest. If you pulled out 10 officials, it might be unjust to execute all of them, but it was definitely not unjust to execute one after another. The officials were corrupt and did not do anything. Chu Li was a rank 2 scribe of the House of High Dukes, and had a high position. However, he could not control the government, so he was powerless. The government should have wiped out evil bandits like the Solace Hill a long time ago. This situation was different from the Raging Tiger Troop. The Raging Tiger Troop had innate masters. They were targets of the House of High Dukes. The House of High Dukes failed to wipe them out for their evil deeds. The Solace Hill had no innate masters, so it was under the government's jurisdiction. Qin Xiaofeng said, "Green Hill is ruthless. If it wasn't for you, the 3 of them would have lost their lives. They really don't know the dangers of Jianghu." Chu Li said, "Looks like Green Hill will continue to pester us." "Then let them come." Qin Xiaofeng smiled lightly. She was a grandmaster, so she was not afraid of Green Hill. Chu Li was puzzled. Taihua Valley was only a second-rate faction. They should not have any surpassing state. How could they have 2 grandmasters? Qin Xiaofeng being a grandmaster was already shocking enough. Mei Ao Shuang was also a grandmaster. She was about the same age as him, but she was already a grandmaster. No wonder she was famous in the martial arts world. Mei Ao Shuang was just like her name, she was as cold as ice. She only nodded lightly when he Binghua introduced her, and did not say a word. Chu Li did not need to use the omniscient mirror to know that she did not like to talk, nor did she like crowds. More importantly, she was a scribe of the House of High Dukes. She said lightly, "Masters Junior Qin." Qin Xiaofeng slapped her forehead and smiled lightly, "Look at me, I'm old. Take it." She took out a green jade bottle from her sleeve and placed it on the table. "Master Chu, I have no way to repay you for saving my life. This is a bottle of Taihua Gold Pill. It is our Taihua Valley's unique medicine. It can change one's physique. Take it as a token of gratitude. I hope Master Chu does not mind." Chu Li closed fist saluted, "Thank you, Senior Qin." He picked up the green jade bottle and kept it in his sleeve. Although he did not know what kind of pill the Taihua Gold Pill was, since it was taken out to thank her for saving his life, it was definitely not an ordinary item. He activated the omniscient mirror and saw Qin Xiaofeng's heartache. The Taihua Gold Pill could change one's physique, allowing those who did not cultivate to achieve the effect of cultivating their physique. It had endless uses. Because the herbs were rare, the valley could only produce 2 or 3 pills every year. She gave them all to Chu Li. Seeing that he accepted it so readily, Qin Xiaofeng's smile widened. "Master Chu, you are already a rank 2 scribe of the House of High Dukes at such a young age. How rare." Chu Li smiled. "It was a coincidence that I made a few contributions." He closed fist saluted. "Then I shall not disturb you any further." At this moment, Chen Ying came in wearing a bluish-white gown. When she saw him, she pursed her lips and smiled. "Master, you are here. You know Valley Leader Mei?" Chu Li smiled and turned to walk out. "Stop!" Mei Ao Shuang suddenly shouted. Chu Li turned his head to look at her. This was the first time Mei Ao Shuang spoke. Her voice was slightly hoarse but magnetic. It tugged at his heartstrings. Mei Ao Shuang said, "Young Qining, is he the master you were talking about?" "Yes." Qining smiled. "I did not expect Valley Leader Mei to know master. Is he the one who did not allow you to be my disciple?" Mei Ao Shuang asked. Qining smiled embarrassedly. "Valley Leader Mei, I did not want to. You think you can hide it from me?" Mei Ao Shuang scoffed and turned to look at Chu Li. "Master Chu Li, I did not expect you to be young Qin Ying's master." Chu Li said, "Thank you for your kindness, Valley Leader Mei. Why did you not agree?" Mei Ao Shuang said, "Although the Tai Hua Valley is not a first-rate faction, it is not bad either. Would young Chen Ying be wronged?" Chu Li waved his hand. "Valley Leader Mei, you are too serious. I did not want her to get involved in this mess." Qin Xiaofeng quickly smiled. "Master Chu Li, come, sit down and talk. I did not expect such a coincidence. Our valley leader thinks that Chen Ying has a good aptitude. It is a pity for her to stay here. Our valley leader is eager to take her in." Chu Li said, "The people of the martial arts world fight and kill. It is not suitable for Chen Ying. Young Chen Ying has excellent aptitude. She will surpass me in the future." Mei Ao Shuang said, "She will definitely become a grandmaster. Do you have the heart to let her serve others here?" Chu Li smiled. "It is not easy to become a grandmaster. Who knows how many dangers she will have to go through. Forget it." Mei Ao Shuang squinted her eyes and said coldly, "You are afraid that she will surpass you." Chu Li was startled and then laughed. "You can say that. Narrow-minded and intolerant." Mei Ao Shuang sneered. "Valley Leader." Qin Xiaofeng hurriedly waved her hand and smiled at Chu Li embarrassedly. "Master Chu Li, please don't take it to heart. Valley Leader has a bad temper. She really has good intentions. She cannot bear to see such a good talent being wasted." Chu Li said, "Senior Qin, I think Chen Ying is doing very well now. Although she is serving others, no one dares to mess around. She does not have to fight and kill. She will not encounter danger. She can live a peaceful life. You have no ambition." Mei Ao Shuang gave him a sidelong glance. Chu Li ignored her and closed fist saluted at Qin Xiaofeng. "I will take my leave first." "Stop." Mei Ao Shuang scoffed. Chu Li turned his head and looked over. "Valley Leader Mei, what advice do you have?" Mei Ao Shuang said coldly, "Young Chen Ying should choose her own path. Who are you to decide?" Chu Li spread his hands. "Then let young Chen Ying decide for herself. Doesn't she listen to you?" Mei Ao Shuang scoffed. Chu Li smiled. "Then I have no choice." Mei Ao Shuang was furious and glared at him fiercely. It was not easy to find a person with such exceptional qualifications. As long as he cultivated the heart technique of Tai Hua Valley, he would be able to soar into the sky and amaze the world with a single feat, stepping into the Grandmaster's boundary in one go. Such a genius. She was actually serving others here. It was a sin. And this sinner was Chu Li. Unfortunately, Chen Ying listened to Chu Li. If Chu Li did not agree, Chen Ying would not agree. Based on her temper, she would have beaten Chu Li to the ground a long time ago. She would choke him and force him to agree obediently. She also knew that doing so would only make Chen Ying further away. She could only forcibly endure and restrain her temper and impulsiveness. However, her anger was getting stronger and stronger. She took a deep breath. Her proud chest rose and fell violently. She suppressed the anger that kept rising and said in a low voice, "Tell me, what do you want to do to make you agree?" Chu Li shook his head. "I can only disappoint Valley Leader Mei's good intentions. Goodbye." A red shadow flashed and a fragrant smell assailed his nose. Mei Ao Shuang floated to the door and blocked Chu Li's way. She stared at him coldly. Chu Li looked at her with a smile, calm and quiet. Fang Xiaofeng hurried forward and pulled Mei Ao Shuang to sit down. She smiled. "Everything can be discussed. Valley Leader, don't be impatient. Let me talk to Master Chu. Chu Li said, Senior Fong need not say anything. This matter is settled. Goodbye. After that, he stepped out of the room and strode out. Mei Ao Shuang wanted to get up but was held back by Fong Xiaofeng. Chen Ying and Li Yu hurried to catch up with Chu Li. Chen Ying said guiltily, Master. Chu Li smiled. It seems that Valley Leader Mei really values you. She wants to fall out with me. Chen Ying said embarrassedly, I will make it clear to Valley Leader Mei. Chu Li said, It's useless to say anything. She has set her sights on you. Oh right, you should rest in the public house for a few days in case she does anything. Mei Ao Shuang entered the Grandmaster's boundary at such a young age. She must be proud and arrogant. She was also the Valley Leader. She would ask for anything. If she was rejected, she would do anything. She might even snatch Chen Ying away. Chen Ying smiled. Valley Leader Mei is not that kind of person. I hope not, Chu Li said. He waved his hand and left the Leisure Cloud pub. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.